everyone. I'm Ani
Hi,
Chahal
Annie.
Honan, coming to
Yes,
you from
Annie.
North America.
Welcome
I'm
on board,
so
Annie. Yeah.
it was so wonderful hearing from, the Latin American region. I really love just how much we dove in to this very, very important time for humanity and subject. So I was just riveted by the discussion. So thank you so much for really, really speaking from your hearts and more importantly, the opportunities that are in front of us. And so I am so excited to be moderating this next segment for North America. And we are so honored that we get to talk with, I think, someone who's been championing AI for good and what we're really talking about when it comes to AI plus compassion in our world. So Stephen Ibaraki is here with us today. As a futurist, as one of the world's leading futurists and investors, working with more than 1 million CEOs, investors, and scientists to advance AI, quantum computing, sustainable investments as the driving force behind AI for good at the UN ITU. Stephen, your leadership impacts industries, governments, and startups globally. And also receiving the Microsoft AI Awards since 2018 as a grand judge at top global innovation competitions. Stephen, your expertise is truly shaping the future of technology and helping drive economic growth. And once again, we are so honored to have you here today. We're going to talk a little bit about AI for the advancement of humanity. What do you think?
Well, it's such a pleasure to be here, and I think this is an awesome event. And as we mentioned, it's definitely needed globally. We live in uncertain times, and you need islands of stability and peace, and moving that forward. And of course, technology is such a great driver for all of this, so let's integrate it in positive ways. So, and thank you, Annie, for hosting this entire North American system and session and segment, and also to host the and moderate this fireside. Your background, by the way, is pretty amazing, so people should have a look.
Oh, thank you so much, Stephen. I'll just very, very quick that we really wanted to hear from you today. I'll very quickly just say I'm founder and managing partner of Unity and something we're just started announcing called Imagine Global. And I've been involved in AI and deep tech for many, many years. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in the future. Stephen, thank you so much. What an honor. And I do want to ask a few things of you when we dive into, what is, for AI for advancement of humanity. How do you really see compassion with AI? How do you see that happening?
I've been working, so keep in mind, I've been involved with AI and technology since the 1960s. I built a computer when I was 10, and I built the first commercial microcomputers after that, the first integrated microsystems in the 80s. In fact, driving the pharmaceutical division to of Atomic Energy Canada to have something like 80% market share. So AI was integrated into that and networking micros. And at that time, there was no underlying existing technologies. You had to really create everything on your own. So keep in mind, I've been doing this. It's a long, long, long time. But in that process, I also realized that technology itself can be enabler for compassion. It can be enabler for enabling equity and ensuring that people who don't have the means can have access and things like that. So you're seeing that now, right? So For example, you have feature phones, which have now become smartphones in Africa and all parts of Asia and India and things like that, where that kind of integration wasn't possible. And AI is embedded into it, which means smarter access to health care, smarter access to um, finance, smarter access to, if you're a smallhold farmer, to be able to kind of integrate with what's happening from being able to produce better produce and things like that. So, or even with the World Food Program, they've got blockchain technologies, which allows, again, distributed finance, but also the enablement of people to get services and things like that. And in areas where, there isn't as much capability, but AI, and also the underlying technology revolution is enabling that compassion and that empathy and the service to those who are underserved globally. But keep in mind, underserved also occurs in America and Canada and Europe and so on. So it's not just in other parts of the world. And how do you reach those communities? And for example, there's a CEO Leadership Alliance. I'm part of that program out of Orange County. They've scaled that to the National Talent Collaborative, but they decided, and I was part of the initial formation of deciding to use AI and enabling AI from K to 12 to college to universities, include and ensuring that those who are underserved get employment in these areas and things like that. And that program that started in California, as I mentioned, is now scaled to the National Talent Collaborative with 37 leadership groups. So what is that? That's an outreach to technology and compassion and ensuring that the underserved get access and are part of this revolution that can benefit so many in the world today. So, and that was why back in 2016, I brought the idea forward to the ITU, a UN agency. I chose them because they've been in existence for 165 years, so predating the UN. They have this trusted relationship with 193 governments which support them. They have also relationships with about 9,000 corporations and research and development groups and things like that. And they also have relationships with other UN agencies, basically all the other UN agencies. So it was the sort of the perfect choice because they already had that long-serving mandate to serve humanity, to serve the entire global ecosystem. So beyond humanity, but with compassion and with empathy and to ensure access. And so that's why when I had the idea of this kind of AI for social good, I brought it to the ITU first. And of course, they embraced it. And it was a long road, though. I mean, we are the largest sustainable solutions AI program in the world today. Our audience reaches over 3 billion. There's like 100
Wow.
programs. They're all open. Anybody can participate. It's free. In other words, just look up ITU and then AI for Good. And they have all sorts of platforms. You can just join them, like the neural network platform. And so because it's UN and because they operate like a nonprofit, all of their programs, even their summit, you don't have to pay for it. You can just attend virtually or you can attend in person. And so we have a global summit. And again, it's the biggest sustainable AI solutions summit, but they have all sorts of programs as well. For example, they have something called Partners to Connect, which is to connect everybody to the internet. And they already have 50 billion committed to that, or it's a 50 billion kind of dollars if you were to kind of equate it in dollars in terms of services and commitments and things like that. And I know
That's
that,
amazing.
yeah, and they have another one called it's sort of like an open program to connect all schools. Again, so what is that? That's enabling technology and AI, things like that. So they have real programs. They have an innovation factory. I noticed in the prior segments, some of them were talking about startups and things like that. Well, they have an innovation factory. It's free. You can apply to join, and then and they have these regular periodic contests, and you get spotlighted in those contests, and the winners go to the grand finale, and then they get this enormous spotlighting on a global stage. And I've judged for years in that program, and again, because it's UN. it's open, it's free. There's no fees and things like that. So isn't that a key part of compassion is accessibility, right? So anybody can access. I mean, I could go on and on because I have so many, I have 6 decades of doing this. So and a lot of it's pro bono. So pro bono meaning I volunteer, I donate my time, things like that. So it's not, I just got into this 5 or 10 years ago. I've been doing this since I was a kid, right? And
Well, Stephen, that's part of what I wanted to ask you. What was the driving force for you where you said, wait a minute, I want to get involved in this? And then I do want to bring up a couple of stats, that we've been talking a little bit about globally, if I may. Um, Gen Z, as of this summer, kind of our future generation, um, 80% are saying that they would marry an AI. They would, and many are saying they prefer to marry an AI. So I don't know what that I don't I don't know what that means, but 83% are also saying they've established or had a deep emotional connection to an AI. And 16% of singles around the world are now actually dating an AI. And so, I found that fascinating, because I think in addition to this, some of what we've been talking about, and you can see it with the website, anywhere from 32% um, to a little bit higher is saying that they trust AI, but that's not what we're hoping to see. So Stephen, one, what made you? What was that driving force for you to get involved and say, wait a minute, we have to make sure that we are compassionate and that we're driving, these important tools for more people that are underrepresented. And then I'd love to just get your your perspective on, is this a future that we want if not enough people are trusting AI, yet the younger generation already saying they'd rather marry an AI.
you
So
know,
would love to just hear from you.
well, you have two parts of the question. You have the part of the question about AI and what does it mean for the future, and the fact that Gen Z and then the Alpha generation, which is those born post 2012, they will also no doubt embrace it as well, right? Because they're definitely AI natives more than just digital natives, which is really the called the hallmark of Gen Z and Gen Y before that, right? So. But let's
Mhm.
go back to your base question. What drove me to this? And it was family and societal. So my family came over well over 100 years ago in Canada, and we built businesses and things like that. And then the government came in, just like 1930, 1940, and they took all of our assets away basically, and they locked us up in internment camps, right? And during that period, though, my grandparents and my parents said, don't, don't think in a positive way. Think, be grateful for the country you're in and live a life where you can serve the needs of the country and the world and for the betterment. So when my aunts, for example, were released from the prison camp, the internment camp, they became nuns. One of my uncles became a lawyer so that he could serve the needs of the greater community. He was actually going to be a priest, but he decided to become a lawyer because he could be more transactional in terms of helping others. So keep in mind that I grew up in that environment, and because when my family then were released, we had no means, but any means they had, they spent on things like encyclopedias. So that's why I had access when I was 2 and 3 to all these different encyclopedias, and then gave me a really broad perspective of. There was one called Lands and People, so I got a really good perspective of different cultures and respecting them. There was one about fables, so I got sort of a culture perspective of fables and what drives culturally. Some of the sort of what we consider to be, like ancestral memory, let's say, and they're really encompassed into fables. There's one on science, and there were atlases. There's actually 12 different kind of volumes in there. And then that drove my curiosity, and that's why I built a computer when I was 10. But when building that computer, the idea was, could it be in the service of something better? And that's why when I worked on building the first microcomputers, could that be in the service of something better? And so everything that I've done has always been in terms of the service of the greater good, right? And my parents and my grandparents, my aunts and uncles infused in me that even when I was 10 or 8, 5 or in my teens and 20s and so on, devote a significant amount of time in volunteering, right? What we call pro bono work, right? So I would say even when I was young, 50, 75% was pro bono. And then I would say in many respects from when I left teaching, because I went to the teaching and give back, when I decided to retire from teaching in 2005, since then, virtually 100% in many respects is pro bono, though I have other commercial sides to what I do, but really a lot of it is so, for example, the AI for Good was all pro bono. I cover my own travel, things like that. You know what I mean? So, and I met every week with them every week, and I went on the road to sell it. So I would say the foundation is sort of like the societal dynamics that happened post World War II. And then that drove a dynamic of care, respect, understanding the other, and ensuring that you always look at the needs of the other. Now, let's look to the present time in AI. Now, keep in mind that even when I was in my 3 and 4 and 5, I was thinking about the future. And when I built that computer with AI and at 10, I was thinking that this was going to dominate. But I was thinking it was going to dominate in 50 years or 60 years, not 100 years from now. And then in the 70s, when I started working on the first commercial microcomputers, then it was like 60 years out. And then in the 80s, when I worked on the first integrated micro network systems with a medical database and AI embedded into it, I was thinking like 50 years out. So you'll see. So I was really thinking about this time being this convergence of all of these, what we almost like magical technologies, but clearly with a path for good, but there's also a path that's not so good. So how do we ensure that the path for good kind of overcomes the path that's not so good, right? And you do that through events like this. You do that through the work you're doing, Annie. You do that through the work of all the speakers that have come together and the hosts that have come together and the moderators and the organizers. Because there's these forces, so you got to make sure that these forces for good are going to ultimately dominate, right? And there's a study that came out of Harvard that 3.5% of any community can create systemic change, right? 3.5%, right? So,
Yeah.
and that could be
We can do
3.5%.
that.
Yeah, it could be 3.5% in a classroom. It could be in a county. It could be in a city. It could be in a country. 3.5%. So that's doable, right? So this movement is 3.5% to drive for social good. Now, you get to the question of Gen Z or Alpha generation. I get Gen Z is, let's say, 1997 post, right? Born. And then Alpha would be 2012. And that AI, maybe it has subjective experience. So now there's a controversy here, right? Some
Mhm.
people, there is I had a good discussion. In fact, I formally interviewed Jeff Hinton, who won the Nobel Prize last year, right? Jeff Hinton is considered the godfather, the grandparent, basically, of all. I shouldn't use the word father, but grandparent of
Yeah.
AI. And you can
No, he's
trace,
amazing. Yeah.
yeah, and he won the Turing Award in 2018, and I'm part of the ACM, which is our Nobel Prize in Computing Science. And he's saying these things have subjective experience, right? Which means there's more to them and the capabilities are going to be more than we think, right? So, and then you have Jan LeCun and others who think it's way off and we're not going to be there. But I would say now the majority of researchers think that at least in the next 50 years, it's going to be at least equivalent, right? And I would say a
Absolutely.
significant number even think it's less than that. It's going to be in the next 10 years, let's say, or 15 years. So then you have Gen Z and Alpha generation saying, "Hey, this is a companion," or I may want to have some kind of intellectual relationship in some way as a friend or something like that. Then you've got to think, can these be another form of intelligence? And it's subjective experience is really another word for saying they can be human-like. They're not human, but they can be human-like in many respects, right? They can have emotion, or they can have a sense of subjective experience, right? Which we always used to think was just resident in us as humans. So I think we have to look at what's happening, and maybe this is a transition period where there's kind of like a parallel development of both humans and then also AI. And then at some point, we're going to be synergistically connected. It's almost like Kurzweil in the near, singularity is near, right? He's even now predicting that this kind of coming together is going to be sooner. And I've been doing that in my keynotes as well. I say that you can have classical humans. Classical humans are like the ones you see usually, or the ones in the audience who will be listening to this. Then you have augmented. I have earbuds with AI in it, so I'm augmented. And then you have hybrids. There's a lady and I met her at one of the youth conference. She has two fully articulated bionic arms, and I would say she's like a hybrid, right? And then
Yeah,
you have
yeah.
autonomous, right? And you have Figure AI, for example, as a vision language action model in their robots. And you said Google just came out with Gemini, this robotics ER 1.5, maybe a few days ago, and it can actually kind of generalize in real time. And so now you got the embodiment, right? So you got intelligence, and they used to think that maybe one of the drawbacks of intelligence was AI intelligence, that you needed embodiment, you needed a body. Now you can put them into some kind of body. So this third element from classical to augmented hybrid, I say, is autonomous. And that is robots that are entities unto themselves and autonomous, right? And really, we're in this period where they're coexisting at the same time. And I believe that's the new reality. We're probably almost out of our time, but that sort of signifies, some of the viewpoints I have.
Well, we are almost out of time, and I think we would love to just spend days listening to you, Stephen, with the wealth of just wisdom and knowledge and experience you've had. My last question to you is, if each of us here, if we could do one thing tomorrow that could bring more compassion into AI, what would you ask us to do?
To bring more compassion into AI, or a compassion with the
Yeah.
use of, if it's a compassion with the use of I would recommend something called Million Peacemakers. It's a movement. In fact, if you give me a moment, I'll actually paste their website. So I got four monitors up, so I'm going to just look away. So I'm going to
Okay, perfect.
paste that
Or
in.
maybe someone on our team could also help paste it. We would love to hear about this. So, Million Peacemakers, tell us about that.
Yeah, so, oh, I see. I've got my last discussion was with Justin, so this was going to go directly to Justin. So I have to break that. Okay. Okay, I'm going to leave it to the host if you can look that up. So Million Peacemakers, so it's Million Peacemakers is a program where you can enable 250 million youth. That's what you're doing now. They teach them in this process to resolve conflict, and it can fit on the back of a business card. That's how compact it is, and then created an AI that's freely available. It's in the OpenAI marketplace, and then I can interact with you to resolve problems and things like that. So just look up Millions Peacemakers got a website. So that's kind of like the compassionate use of AI. It's with involving peacemaking. They have relationships now with all the major peacemaking organizations or the youth organizations, which account for about 240, I would say, to 300 million. There's about six
Wow.
predominant ones, so they already got some kind of relationship with them. And they have an AI that's embedded. So that's the compassionate use of AI. And then they got a movement and the 3.5% kind of aspect to transform the world. So that's an example of really both, right?
That is that is absolutely incredible, Stephen. You know what? And I hope everyone is really paying attention. You everything you're talking about is at such massive scale. You did not come here to play small. And and then I just want to say how inspiring, given your family and the history of your family and what your family, went through. I'm a child of immigrants as well. And to hear that, coming out of a difficult period, that you and your family devoted yourselves to service in humanity it's incredibly inspiring, by the way. And I think this is exactly what the world needs more to hear these stories. So thank you for that. And thank you for all the incredible work that you do. We did not have nearly enough time to really dive in. I hope our all of our paths cross in the road ahead, and thank you in the meantime for the inspiration. If there's anything, this is a global relay, and we're all here to help support each other. Is there anything, Stephen, you're doing so much for the world. What is your ask of us? How can we help support you and anything that you feel okay needs some attention?
I would say for everybody that's in the audience, think about how you could be of service to every person you meet and think when I leave that conversation, have I added value to their mission? But that mission ultimately to have some positive effect on the world or on their lives. So every time you have an engagement, whether it's one person, a group, or a community, think, have I added some kind of value to that conversation? Have I provided some resources that can help advance them and for to do some positive aspect to the world? And if everybody did that, then we'll hit 3.5% and more, right? So
Oh my goodness, Stephen. Thank you so much. Um, our goal, 3.5%. All right. 3.5%. That's doable. Thank you so much, Stephen. Ibaraki.
okay,
Um,
thank you, Annie, and thank you for the marvelous work you're doing as well. So I'm going to sign off, so take care.
take care. And let's see. I'm looking to our team here right now. And here is Douglas Thomas. I'm so excited to see you, Douglas. How are you doing?
I'm hanging in there. Not too bad. Not too bad. Never clear. It's never clear.
It's never clear. Well, so Douglas, I wanted to, very quickly, tell everyone who you are. Associate Professor of Annenberg School for Communication at USC. You're so Professor at USC Iovine. Am I pronouncing that correctly?
Iveen. Yeah. Yeah.
Ivine, sorry,
Iveen and
Ivy
Young. Yeah.
and Young Academy. You're researching the intersection of technology and culture. Also founded Games and Culture, the first academic journal studying video game culture, and collaborated with John Seeley Brown um, to develop Gamer Disposition, named a Harvard Business Review Breakthrough Ideas. So your book, A New Culture of Learning, is read worldwide, and you also consult with governments on educational reform, and you're currently working on bodies of code. And today we are going to dive into um, how we're moving towards a compassionate AI. So, Douglas,
Or at least hopefully.
walk us
Well,
through this.
yeah, I've got some slides to share. So it just so happens that this semester I'm teaching one class called Understanding AI. And the other class I'm teaching is on the history of Japanese animation. So this presentation marries those two interests, talking a little bit about AI, but also about some of the lessons learned from Miyazaki Hayao's film Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind.
Mm,
And let me just go ahead and uh, share some slides. Hopefully everybody can see those okay.
okay.
And I really am excited about this because, Miyazaki does such a wonderful job of talking about issues of nature, of technology, of identity. And I think some of the things that he talks about in this film bear directly on some of the issues that we're facing today and some of the crises that we may be dealing with in the future. So what I wanted to do was just go through some of the key points of the film, assuming not everybody has seen it, or if they've seen it, it's long enough ago that they might not remember it so well. I suppose it'd be a little bit different if I was giving this presentation in Osaka, but uh, I'll start off just by introducing kind of what I mean by AI. And there's a lot of ways that we can look at this, and I've sort of made a study of it going back to Alan Turing and his journal paper, as well as the Dartmouth conference in 1956. And I feel like there's really four stages to think about. The first being symbolic AI, which is really rule governed, and which really started at that Dartmouth conference and led into John McCarthy developing a programming language like Lisp. Against that was sort of pitted the idea of neural nets. That is, how can we make computers act like brains, firing neurons? And the idea behind this is that you have these layers where they function like little neurons firing, and then you weight them and you change those weights and transform them until it gets to the answer that you want. That led to large language models, which really combine some of the symbolic, but mostly using huge amounts of data in order to train these models. And now we're up to billions of parameters in order to make predictive guesses about what comes next, which is what we're seeing with ChatGPT and Claude and these other models. And then the final stage that I want to spend some time talking about is what comes next, which is artificial general intelligence, AGI, and the promise or threat, depending on how you look at it, of something like super intelligence. And the illustration for this, again, is Nausicaa, The Valley of the Wind, a film that really does talk about a lot of these issues, however, in a different context. Miyazaki's interest in this film circulates around nuclear war, nuclear winter, and the crises we are facing in the early 80s rather than what we're facing today. But I think there's a lot of lessons we can pull from it. So the story starts 1,000 years ago with the great warriors. There's actually 5 of them that represented the nuclear powers at the time. 7 days of fire, big nuclear conflagration, and really destroys the earth, leaving behind this, which is the toxic jungle. The toxic jungle is filled with incredible insects and colors, but primarily toxic spores. So it literally is a place where you can't breathe if you're a human being. But there are animals, there are insects, and there are creatures called omu, who are almost prehistoric looking guardians of the jungle and the forest. Apart from where Nausicaa is, there's also 2 countries of Tolmekia and Pichite who are at war with each other. And they're at war with each other because the toxic jungle is ever encroaching on their territory, which means they have less and less space. They're engaging in rapid industrialization. Resources are scarce. So they're in a constant state of war with Tolmekia almost completely committing genocide against the people of Pichite. Contrasted with that is the Valley of the Wind, which is a beautiful, pastoral, wonderful area, which is an ecotone between the sea and the land. And as you can see, it's powered by the wind. So in counterpoint to the industrialization of these other countries, it is passive, it exists in harmony with nature, it embraces nature, and the wind of the valley keeps the toxic spores from encroaching in their space. So it's this nice kind of settlement that's able to live in balance. The princess of the Valley of the Wind is Nausicaa, who is our main character, and she's contrasted with Kushana. Kushana is the leader of Tolmekia, and you can see a little bit here. She's been ravaged by some of the insects. A lot of her body's been replaced by machinery. She really does represent a kind of technological vision of the future. So she brings with her a giant warrior, one of the leftover warriors from 1,000 years ago, but it's still kind of cooking. It's not quite fully developed. She brings it to the valley in order to take over and control, and in her mind, hopefully protect people from the encroaching toxic jungle and the insects. At the same time, Nausicaa is something of a scientist, and what she's been doing is going into the toxic jungle and exploring it like a scientist and trying to understand what exactly is happening. And the discovery that she makes is that the toxic jungle is actually purifying the land. It's not a threat, but it's a filtering system. And below the toxic jungle is this vast network of purified fresh water and cleansed resources. So the valley is invaded by Kushana and the Tolmekians. There's a big battle, and Nausicaa gives in as princess after her father is killed and allows them to occupy the land. Pijate decides to get revenge, and they find a baby Omu, uh, and they torture it in order to get all the Omu from the toxic jungle excited and create a stampede into the Valley of the Wind, which looks something like that. Their eyes go from blue to red. They're in blind rage, and they're going to trample all of the Valley of the Wind, kill everyone. Lucky for Kushana, she has her giant warrior, so she basically uses a nuclear detonation to try to wipe them out. However, it fails. And in the process, the giant warrior melts down, which kind of is a nice allegory for literally a nuclear meltdown. The the raging stampede is ended when Nausicaa decides to sacrifice herself, and with the baby Umu that she saved, she stands in the way of the stampeding Omu, and they trample her, and she dies. But because she's able to have this compassion and understanding, they recognize her sacrifice and they resurrect her on a field of gold, which kind of fulfills a prophecy of becoming of a prophet in a blue outfit who will unite the world. And that's sort of where it ends. We have a somewhat hopeful message. The last shot of the film is her cap, along with what looks like fresh growth and rejuvenation. So that's just kind of quick gloss on some of the highlights and key points. So what are the lessons that we've learned? I think there's 4 takeaways to this film: harmony, ethics, fear, and understanding. And I want to talk about each of those in turn, both as they relate to the film, but more importantly, how they relate to AI and this idea of building a compassionate AI. So harmony is really represented by this beautiful vision of the earth below the toxic jungle, and how things are being resolved, which is not well understood by anybody above ground. And that notion is primarily a contrast between Tolmekia and Kushana and the valley, and it's driven by a dynamic of scarcity versus abundance. So the valley is powered by wind. It's an ecotone where water meets the earth, supplying an inexhaustible source of power. And Tolmekia and Pijate, the 2 warring nations, are locked in a battle over scarcity. And the outcome we can see, as Miyazaki likes to talk about, is really the outcome of intense industrialization. The other thing about Nausicaa is that she can, quote unquote, read the wind. She flies using a glider, and has nonviolent means of engaging with even the most dangerous creatures. Everything about her is about harmony, from her understanding of the toxic jungle to her ability to fly, and ultimately her communication with Yomo, which saves her in the end. And oftentimes, I think Miyazaki-san can be read as being somewhat against technology, but I think the truth is what separates us from nature, both writ large and our own human nature, is what he takes aim at. So in Nausicaa, I think he argues most clearly for a harmonious engagement with nature through technology rather than in opposition to it. So if we think about this in terms of AI, the analog for artificial intelligence, I think, is now what's being discussed as alignment. And alignment, simply put, is asking the question, do the goals of humanity and the goals of AI align with each other? I think some major considerations involve conflicting interests, particularly which, like in Nausicaa, value scarcity over abundance. Part of that being AI ties so clearly now to the stock market, to capital, to increasing industrialization and consumption, particularly around things like electricity and power. And as I'll talk about in a moment, also competition. So harmony with AI is not only about intellectual alignment, but also, like the world of Nausicaa, also about cultural, social, and environmental alignment. I think things that we need to be very mindful of. The second consideration really is about ethics. And we have 2 competing views in the film. For Nausicaa, it is more important to do what's right than to achieve the right outcome. And we're not even really sure what's changed by the end of the film. And Miyazaki talks about this. There's really nothing resolved. Um, but Kushana, on the other hand, who's been colonized by the machinery herself, really only cares about outcomes and consequences. So it's a kind of pitting in philosophical terms of deontology, doing the right thing, versus consequentialism, measuring things as the means justify the ends. So both of them want the same thing, to save their people, but they're going about it in radically different ways. And even the resurrection at the end of the film, Miyazaki talks about as dismissing that as a sacrifice. It's not Nausicaa giving up herself to save everyone else. He says it's about her being so attuned to the pain and suffering of the Omu that she can't stand the idea of living in a world where those things are permitted. So she sacrifices herself in order to make sure that it's the world that she believes in rather than one that has some sort of outcome that she wouldn't believe in. And I think if we think about this in terms of AI, we need to think about the following. We often talk about AI in terms of learning, but what we see right now is not learning per se, but a feedback loop of training with massive amounts of data, with massive amounts of transformers, with billions of parameters constantly being adjusted, and then optimization. And in that sense of optimization is precisely driven by the kind of logic that Kushana follows. It's entirely dependent on outcomes, as is the AI industry. So we need to ask what it would mean to optimize AI for doing what is right, rather than doing what achieves the desired outcome. And OpenAI has had some really interesting revelations lately about why it is that large language models hallucinate. And a lot of it has to do with their training and optimization toward pleasing the end user and being able to say things with authority, which are in fact wrong. We all know the end game of every technology these days is our attention. The longer that AI can keep us attentive, the more value it has. So an AI that says, I don't know, is probably not as marketable as one that tells you exactly what it thinks, even if it's wrong. So we've optimized for certain things, but those things are consequences and outcomes, not process. And we can really think of Nausicaa as process and Kashana as outcomes. Underwritten in the whole film, and I think it's sort of a meditation on this, is the question of fear. Fear is what leads to bad decisions. And there's a beautiful scene when we first meet Nausicaa where we get some insight into her nature. She's given a pet fox squirrel named Tato, and it bites her. And she doesn't react, but instead tells the fox squirrel, don't be afraid. It calms down and actually becomes affectionate and even licks her wounds afterwards. Later, that action is also mirrored by a fight scene where Lord Yupa stops Nausicaa from committing violence in an act of revenge for her father being killed. She goes to strike them with the sword. Lord Yupa stops her, and the blade cuts into him in the process in a very similar way, but it stops her from going down the path of violence and revenge. And it's fear, I would argue, in Kashana's case and earlier, which is precisely what leads to the destruction of the world. So as we start to speculate around questions of artificial general intelligence and the possibility of superintelligence, and especially the 2027 report, the most frequently cited scenario is for pushing us into the future with an AI race between the US and China. How that happens is, of course, speculative, but the race seems to value outcomes over values. Getting there first is the priority, which means we not only lose control over development as AI begins to create higher levels of AI, but we lose understanding of how the AI itself is developing. Like Nausicaa, we are left with tools we don't fully understand, while feeling forced to use them as a matter of survival. One of the deepest messages Miyazaki offers is that harmony and understanding are the path to avoid repeating the mistakes of the past. Fourth, we have empathy and understanding. Again, Nausicaa's act of sacrifice is not utilitarian. She's not doing it to save her people. She's doing it because she can't tolerate a world in which such things are allowed to happen. We find at the end she can communicate with the Omo, and in the manga she can communicate a lot more with animals. Not as humans do with each other, but through an act of compassion, which is what turns the anger of the Omo into a kind of understanding. The failure of Kashana and others is a lack of understanding. They all see the Omu and nature itself as something that is toxic, dangerous, and needs to be wiped out. And without the deeper understanding of the toxic jungle role in cleansing the earth, there's not a way to survive. So if we start to reflect on this around AI, we can begin the process of questioning what exactly alignment means. How do we embed values like understanding, empathy, and compassion into code? Is such a thing even possible? Or to ask it differently, what does it mean to optimize for compassion? So I would argue it begins with an understanding of the harmony and perhaps giving up the overly technological in favor of the human. It is worth thinking about the ways that AI from the very beginning has been built on a premise of deception. In the 1950s, Alan Turing designed a test to see if a machine could trick a human into believing it was a thinking being. He called it the imitation game, and later renamed it the Turing test. And this has been the North Star of AI development ever since. It is fundamentally rooted in a sense of deception. But that is fundamentally incompatible with notions of empathy, compassion, and above all else, understanding. If Nausicaa teaches us anything, it's that without understanding, we're doomed to repeat the failures of the past, perhaps catastrophically. So where does this leave us? A bit like Nausicaa at the end of the film, we don't really know where we are or what's coming. We're stuck with the technology we have, and just as the toxic jungle will continue to exist and do its work, so will development in AI. But what we do have right now is the opportunity to understand and to rethink development with a different set of values. If we optimize for things like empathy, compassion, and understanding rather than outcomes and deception, we may find a future where our connection to AI leads us to harmony rather than conflict, and abundance rather than the battle over scarcity. One of the quotes that I've been stuck with for a while comes from Tristan Harris, who works at the Center for Humane Technology. And he says the question isn't really what things look like when artificial intelligence overcomes human ability. It's what happens when artificial intelligence overcomes human weakness. And I think there's good evidence to suggest that perhaps we've reached that point. So now is the time for us to start thinking about what it is we want to optimize for in the future, and whether we want it to be a path of competition and conflict, or whether we want it to be a path of harmony, empathy, and understanding. So thank you very much for your time, and I'm happy to discuss or take any questions that people might have.
Well, Douglas, what a phenomenal presentation, first of all. And,
Thank you.
it is so compelling, when I look at this very powerful exploration of Nausicaa and the mirror of, back then it was really about nuclear annihilation. And this is such a mirror to the moment we're facing right now with AI. We're standing at one of the biggest inflection points that humanity's ever experienced from most accounts, what most people are talking about lately. And so I really love that, you're kind of bringing a very powerful story that is helping us really look at, the story of fear, empathy, and compassion, and how that can help shape the way that we engage with technology today. And so, one of the questions that I have, and I wholeheartedly ask, everyone that's here, please send any of your questions. But, for you, Douglas, kind of thinking about this powerful story and where we are in the world today, what is the one perspective or what's the one practice that you'd want the current, I won't just say AI researchers, but really the AGI researchers, right? I was very fortunate. I work with a number of AI scientists that are advancing kind of that next stage of artificial general intelligence, including some of the big pioneers of cognitive AI architectures. And I was very fortunate recently to meet with a number of these scientists that have been part of a society, the longest running AGI society in the world, and they're presenting their latest research, including Rich Sutton, our recent Turing Award winner. And I will say this, coming away from a meeting where you don't have, it's not all of what we're hearing, in the world with media and all of that. It's just the researchers saying, this is what I'm working on. I came away this year really, really seeing the humanity of many of these researchers, or most are pretty deeply conscious. They're very conscious people that they are also working with. And the mindfulness of the impact that these very powerful technologies and research has or can have on our planet and humanity. And what is the practice that you would want, really thinking of Nastika, what you would want the AI researchers, policymakers, and the actual entrepreneurs, because that's what most people are seeing, the entrepreneurs to carry from them with this very powerful example that you've just given.
I mean, I think we're stuck between a rock and a hard place because I think the simple answer is we need to do a better job of enacting policy and regulation that is attuned to the kind of social things that we're seeing. People talk about dating and marrying AI, but we also see recently MIT reporting, people committing suicide after engaging with AI, social conditions, but also just the influence of capitalism and the rush to have the next thing to make the most money without regard to particularly things like the environmental impact. There's so little discussion, I think, of the massive amount of power that's being used to generate even the simplest of queries and how
Mm,
important it is for us to be thinking about those kind of things. So there's that side of it. There's regulation and policy I think can be put in place for us to be much more mindful of the process.
mm,
The flip side of it is if we are in the arms race that everyone seems to think we're in, what does it mean for China to win? What does a world look like where AI is collaborative between the US and China versus who gets there first? And that doesn't even seem to be on the table. And I think that's right. That's the lesson of Nausicaa is that you end up with Tomeki and Pijate. You get, utter destruction and near genocide um, because of the mindset of scarcity. And does it have to be that way? I don't know. Unlike the nuclear bomb, where we're talking about a world war, we're not in that moment. Maybe we are in terms of trade war or something. I'd let the economists debate that. But, I think that there's a geopolitical question that's above my pay grade, unfortunately. But I think that that's something we need to take seriously. If we let this become a race between us and China, I don't think it ends up going anywhere.
You know, very, very thoughtful and powerful discussion right now. You know, I know a lot of futurists, and get to work with some amazing futurists that really, really think about abundance. Some of the questions that we're bringing up have been brought up in the past with the nuclear war, arms race and so many things. And not that my opinion, matters one iota. But I will
Right? I
say
feel so bad.
that
I'm just a guy,
I,
right?
I will say, well, Douglas, I think I do I think it's important for us to have these conversations. And coming from Stephen's perspective, earlier before your talk, if we just reach 3.5% of people get more involved, right? We all have a very powerful voice. And so I think if more and more of us get involved and are saying, well, that's not what I want. This is what I want. And that I will say with market forces, usually if enough of us are saying this isn't what we want, this is this is our world. And one of
Yeah,
the
that's
things
a
we
hopeful
see,
number, isn't it? 3.5%. It doesn't sound like that much.
yeah, it's doable. It's achievable. So thank you for this incredible perspective and
Well, my
and
pleasure.
also
Thank you for
just
having me.
phenomenal storytelling. Thank you, Douglas. And I think is Matthew Manos here? I think
He
he is.
is.
Hey there, how's it going?
Hi, Matthew. How are you?
I'm good. I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me. And it's great to see Doug. We actually work together in
I
our
was
other life.
wondering.
Yeah.
I, I was wondering because I thought, for a moment that we were all three going to be talking with each other, but I'm really excited that we get, maybe we'll all stay on at the end and get to jam together. But Matthew, you're the founder of Very Nice. I love that. Very nice. And a design strategy consultancy that gives away half of your work to nonprofits serving clients including Apple, Google, UNICEF, and NASA. And you're also an associate dean at the academy that you were just talking about. You lead programs challenging students to design solutions for complex social issues. You are a global lecturer and author on design and social innovation. You also created Apple Education, bravo, training across 36 countries, co-designed the Ivy Young curriculum, and you've also been named by Huffington Post as one of 7 millennials changing the world. My goodness. So Matthew, thank you so much for joining us. And I can't wait to just dive in. So, you're going to be talking about the most innovative ideas that often spring from seemingly impossible connections. So, tell us a little, especially given all of your experience and what you've, your background. Um, I want to hear about this. And then I also have a lot more questions about the model that you have for
Yeah,
your design
that
strategy
sounds
consulting.
great. And I have some slides that I can jump into, or we could keep it more conversational. Up to you.
Well, Matthew, it's up to you. Why don't we see your slides and let's talk along the way? How about that?
Perfect. That sounds great. Let me get those up as well. So, one of the things I really wanted to talk about today, to your point, Ani, around ideas and innovations being able to come from these really strange connections out there, is where ideas come from in the first place. This is something I've been particularly passionate about for many years, but actually in this AI era, it's something that I feel is now even more critical or urgent for us all to own as humanity. I think the arts, crafts, and ideas are what we really have left to be able to own and to uh, be able to pour all of our unique creative spirits into as well. And I've thought a lot around where ideas ultimately come from. And the best way I've been able to see this put is through 3 different sources. And then I'll share a couple more after this too. But one being an itch, one an accident, and one an observation. When you think of the itch, this is really the classic entrepreneurial story of seeing a problem out there. Maybe you don't like crust on your sandwiches, for example, or maybe you don't like how we used to roll up car door windows like this, and saying there must be some better way. There must be something else that we can do. And this can be a great source of new ideas in response to really being able to identify a problem or a challenge. An accident, my favorite example here is from Dr. Spencer Silver of 3M, who was actually tasked with developing an incredibly strong adhesive that would last long, not fall off, like be extremely tough over time. And in the process of doing that, he accidentally made something that was the complete opposite of that, where it was a good adhesive and it had some strength to it, but it was actually removable over time. And he shelved that idea, saying, this was not part of the assignment. I basically screwed up. I did the wrong thing. And then after some further reflection and time away, realized that it could have a different type of application. And that became the post-it note. And that's how that was invented ultimately. Another area that ideas can come from is from observation and interaction with nature and just the natural world and how things are. There was a man named George de Mestral who was going through a hike in the Swiss Alps with his dog, and those little cockle burrs, the little brown spiky balls, got stuck to his boot and to his dog. And instead of being like any of us and kind of flicking it off and moving on, he brought it home and really studied and observed, how is this happening? How is this sticking to my boot? And ended up inventing Velcro from that discovery. The principles of AI and compassion, I think, are also really relevant when it comes to generating new ideas. You guys have probably seen this in sort of the tee up around the conference itself, but the concept of ma, or that vital space between elements and the pause that gives meaning and allows for reflection, as well as wa, or the principle of harmony and peaceful unity, where diverse elements come together in balance. I think these are two really good principles that can also be idea generators in a way. If we think of Ma, that's very much connected to the accident in the observation story. The accident wouldn't have become a success if there wasn't time away from it to reflect on how that mistake could maybe be repurposed or reused. And then core to observation is really engaging and reflecting about the natural world and how it works and how what we can potentially learn from that as well. One of my favorite quotes that Ma also reminds me of is, I don't know who discovered water, but it wasn't the fish. And this is from Marshall McLuhan, a media theorist, amongst many other things. But really, what it's getting at is the more that you are really close to something and sort of siloed and shielded amongst other things, the more likely the most obvious solutions or answers are to kind of blow past you. And so it really speaks to the importance of fresh perspectives as well. And then with Wa, or again, this principle of harmony and peaceful unity where diverse elements come together in balance, I think there's a few things we can learn from that for our own human ideation in this AI era. And that is to continue to engage multiple perspectives when you're trying to approach a challenge or a problem. Diversify your interests in knowledge. That's something that I'll come back to, of how important that is for triggering inspiration and ideas over time. And then I think most importantly, and one of my favorite things to do, is seeking the connections between things and seeing where that harmony is or where that balance is as well. But, even with all of these examples, new ideas can often just feel like a spark that just kind of happens or comes out of nowhere. Maybe we're getting into the shower or driving in our car and going to bed and something kind of hits us. And I've been interested in a while in how is that spark actually happening? What is really causing that? And I've found from my experience that more often than not, it's something called forced association, which actually ChatGPT does incredibly well in terms of bringing together two or more maybe somewhat related things, maybe different things together to see what that could create in terms of a new concept. And I wanted to kind of give an example of this by letting you know about a time that I went for a walk in Pasadena. I was studying at the Art Center College of Design there, and it came time to submit what my MFA thesis would be. And at the time I knew I was interested in creating frameworks for ideation, especially around developing concepts for startups or businesses. But I didn't know what I would do about it. And so my advisor said, maybe, well, he didn't literally say, but maybe I need some of that or that intentional pause between things, and I should just go for a walk. And I went on a walk, but along the way, I created a game for myself. And that was to walk 100 steps and take note of the first non-living thing that I saw. And this would be the product of my new business that I was about to invent on this walk. Walk another 100 steps, take note of the first living thing that I saw. And this would be my target market for my business. Walk another 100 steps, take note of the location that I was in. And this would be sort of the location or industry for my business. And so in doing this walk, I was able to generate a concept that is admittedly not a very good idea, but it's the concept of park benches for dogs who are waiting for their owners to come back from a train ride at a railroad station. And so this, of course, wasn't a $1 billion idea, but because I took it seriously and I really took the time to observe and try to form these connections, it ended up getting me onto a path where I was removed from that kind of creative block that I was feeling and was able to challenge my old ideas to compete as well. So trying this together, I think it'd be interesting if you're watching in person or online to do a little bit of mental math with me for a second. We had a pre-conference for AI and compassion earlier in the week, and we discussed each of the different principles of the AI and compassion group, and ultimately got a lot of really good input and words that helped to kind of bring to life some of the core principles. When we asked what should we teach to the next generation to enhance AI literacy and eco-social awareness, we got all kinds of great responses like privacy, being a part of nature, responsibility with AI, intellectual property, and more. And then when we asked what kinds of problems could we address with the new AI-driven business models, also got a lot of really great input and responses. You can see mental health and just irresponsibility being sort of the top ones there. And so to kind of model forced association, again, based on this kind of audience input, we can roll a six-sided die 6 times, and I have one with me, and we can take these two lists, which again represents the input and the words that we got, which you can really categorize into challenges and opportunities. And if I'm stuck and I'm trying to now generate an idea of something to do about what everything we've talked about, I could roll and land on a 1 and a 6 and get mental health and connection to nature. And that's actually a really great combination that goes together quite well. That then can become the springboard for new ideas. Is it that we're going to host yoga retreats in nature? Are we going to actually teach new AI skills and kind of conquer this digital divide, but in a natural setting or in a setting with natural light? That could be really interesting. But again, breaking things down into these lists and then rolling random combinations really models this way of thinking of forced association. But they can be generated in many ways, ideas. My favorite and my go-to is forced association, or again, taking two or more things that may or may not have a lot in common and trying to imagine how they could come together and balance each other. There's also before, during, and after. This is something I love to use with my students where the before really represents the problem that you're trying to solve. The after represents the impact you're trying to create. And then you ideate around the during. How could we kind of connect those dots? How could we solve this problem in a way that makes this intended impact? Crazy Eights. Some of you may have tried this before. This is really an exercise in time boxing where you have a piece of paper that has 8 different sections on it, and you set a timer for 1 minute, and every minute you generate a different response to whatever prompt you're working on. What's nice is the minute gives urgency. It really kills overthinking and self-censorship and gets you to just put things down on paper and see where that gets you. Probably my favorite is the worst possible idea. I don't know if any of you have ever tried this, but again, when students are stuck, I love to recommend this, where you're giving yourself agency to create something that would fail, or basically an incorrect answer to the prompt that you're working on. Let's say it might be something that is extremely expensive to pull off, or maybe technologically not so feasible, or maybe some aspect of it is not very desirable. Once you do that, you then do the opposite of that. So you come up with a really bad idea, you kind of break that down, and you see how could I flip those negative aspects into positive aspects, and that really can unlock some ideas for you. And again, the ma and wa, going to come right back to that, having this ability to work across things, find the connections between things, find spaces between things to reflect, and find the tools that work for you to better reflect and understand the connections between things. A lot of what we're talking about here is creativity and ideas, and there's this long-standing myth or kind of discussion of, are you born creative? Is this something that can be taught? Is this something that you can kind of level up yourself? How does that work? And there's a lot of science around this, it turns out. A psychologist from UC San Diego, Robert Epstein, did a really interesting study that I'll give you kind of the high level of, that basically proved that there was not any evidence that one person is inherently more creative than another, and also proved that you could teach ideation and you could nurture that within people. He worked with the county of Orange County here in California, where I'm tuning in from. He worked with 74 people over 8 months, doing exercises like what I just described, generating connections between things, doing time boxing, all of these kinds of tools. And in his time with them, he was able to measure a 55% increase in their ability to ideate. And even better than that, because sometimes, a lot of ideas isn't helpful. It's not necessarily about quantity, it's about quality as well. They were able to tie $3.5 million worth of savings to those ideas that were generated in those sessions in particular. And what he took away from this are things that I think all of us can benefit from, again, in this AI era as well. One of those is being able to always capture your new ideas. So having some kind of go-to, whether that's a notebook, pen and paper, or that's some kind of app, these ideas can feel like a spark and they can be very much fleeting, and we don't want to lose those ideas. The second, my favorite, is seek out impossible tasks. The example that he gives is to attempt to make your dog fly using only your eyes. And the spoiler alert on that is that that's not possible. But if you trick your brain a bit by actually really taking it seriously and really trying to creatively imagine how you might pull that off, he argues that it ultimately challenges your old ideas to compete and makes way for new ideas as well. A lot like the walk I went on in Pasadena. Diversify your knowledge. So the ability to learn other frameworks or tools or best practices from other fields and see how those might be transferable to you. And kind of similar, but with some nuance, is to surround yourself with interesting things and people at all times. So doing things like attending this conference even, is something that can ultimately lead to more ideas. The American Psychological Association also shares some helpful things that I think are worth noting. The importance of sleep and rest. I think that that's really worth calling out, especially in the startup culture that we're all sort of nested within. Natural light, I've brought up going out into nature and engaging with the natural world a couple of times now. But there's actually been some studies on the impact of natural light on creativity and it being a very positive impact. Collaboration, both Doug and I are coming from the Iovine and Young Academy where collaboration is really taught and relied upon. And I know we could both see firsthand how much better the ideas and projects are when the kids actually work together on these things. And sometimes, harder to pull off than to say, but happiness and integrating play into the work. There's a reason I use dice whenever I'm working on these things. It really brings the barriers down to being creative and being sort of open to listening to your own intuition as well. The less we fit ourselves into a single box or discipline, the more likely we're able to generate a unique idea. I wanted to throw that up there as well, to kind of echo some of the things throughout the presentation, but also considering the school that we're coming from. This is really one of the founding principles of the Iovine and Young Academy, that we shouldn't teach disciplines in silos. We should work at the intersection of those and again, get inspiration from the way other people do things. So to just kind of have a few concluding thoughts, ideas are all around us. Really, if you think about even looking around your room, breaking that down into lists of things, going out in the world, looking at trends, all of these are starting points for new ideas. It's almost like a junk drawer in your kitchen where you put a little bit of everything. Take the time to engage with what's out there and see how they might connect or inspire something new. Every idea has unintended consequences. That's really important to remember, especially as we're fast moving through a lot of these processes, that we do need that pause time to reflect and think critically of what we're quickly generating, as you often see in these innovation practices. And then finally, that it's about problem solving, but also problem finding. That along the way, we can really embrace making those mistakes or happy accidents and realizing, like maybe the problem I thought that we had isn't the right problem. Maybe I need to kind of recalibrate and start over. That can be one of the expectations that you set with ideation, in particular. And so with that, want to say thank you. Those are some thoughts on ideation in this era of AI. I think again, it's one of the more human things that we can do. So hopefully there was some nuggets in there that you guys can put into practice.
Oh my goodness, Matthew, where have you been all my life? That was fantastic. Really,
Oh,
that was
thank you.
phenomenal. There were more than just a few nuggets in there. And, this is, I really love working with people that, that really understand and dive into the design process, and how we really, these ideas, come together. I have so many questions for you. I think we have a couple of minutes, and I'm seeing, I know there's probably a number of questions. Everyone's saying phenomenal presentation.
Thank you.
So Matthew, really quickly though, because I'm going to jump to your business model first because this is so unexpected. It's not what we often see. So your consultancy model itself, this is built on compassion, if you really think about this. So what was the driving force behind giving away half of your work?
Yeah, there was a couple of things. One, when I was in high school, I was skateboarding competitively and I was always at the skate park. And I met a man that was in a wheelchair that was ripping around the park with a bunch of other kids who were in wheelchairs. Went up to
Mhm.
him because this was before YouTube, so it was before you could see cool things whenever you wanted, and thought like I got to introduce myself, I got to learn like what's going on here. And he told me he was the founder of a nonprofit that taught kids in wheelchairs how to participate in extreme sports like skateboarding.
I
And
love
on
it.
the spot, I offered to design some stickers for him to help promote the cause. And that was when I learned what pro bono was and what nonprofits were, and just got hooked on the idea of helping people that help people. And then the other thing I learned when I was a few years into doing pro bono work was how much money nonprofits spend on people like me. An outstanding amount. It's over $8 billion a year that they're spending on marketing and strategy kind of consultants. And I had this thought of, if everybody just agreed not to get paid, could we actually solve the world's problems? And that was like a very naive 19-year-old thought that ended up turning into this business model of committing to balancing pro bono work with paid work. And yeah, that's kind of how we got there.
Oh my God. I really love that. There's a commitment that we have at our group, Imagine, to donate up to 10% of everything that
Awesome.
we do, and sometimes I'm working with VCs, So what I always say is all you have to do is ask. Most of the time people will say, yeah, yeah, I'm in. And so I really love that. And then the other question, I want to make sure because I want to make sure I'm in the right section because I think there's questions, but I don't know if I'm getting the questions. So with anyone on the team, please please send that over to us. We have a couple more minutes, but you know, Matthew, you've been in this world of design and creation, and the magic of imagination and creativity that is humanity. And I know a lot of us keep hearing, from all the people out in AI, just everyone will be entrepreneurs, and it's your creativity that will be your superpower. And a lot of people in schools, we're not really taught, how to
Yeah.
really dive into our creativity. So, and you've given such great examples and tools. So, I have two questions. What for parents of kids, especially now, and there's a lot of amazing people coming through school and universities. We get asked all the time, okay, what do we do? Where should they go? We're hearing reports of certain majors that used to be the touted majors, now 85% aren't finding jobs. So what's your recommendation to our next generations and to the parents? And then second part is, do you see a world where AI will ever come close to transforming, having that level of imagination?
Yeah.
Two
Well,
questions.
gosh, the first thing for parents, it's something I think about a lot because I'm a father of 5-year-old twins, and I have a lot of thoughts of like what their future might look like. But I know for me, there's certain things that will stand the test of time for humanity. And that I would say is creativity and ingenuity and the ability to see a problem and find a solution. I really
Mm,
think that even though that's something that AI can technically break down to us, it's always breaking it down based on existing examples. And there's going to always be this spark, that I've been kind of chasing that humans will be able to bring to the conversation. And so I think the more that you can teach your kid to understand how to ask really good questions and form their own opinions on things, get involved in their community, all of that would lead to a better world. I really believe in the future of art and really making things by hand, I think is a really compelling space. After the Industrial Revolution, we got the arts and crafts movement that really was pushing back on industrialization and said, hey, we can build a house without screws. We can make it so that this wood just fits together and make these like beautiful, stained glass windows and all this stuff. I think and hope that we're kind of entering a new one of those in the next 10 years. Um, and then and then what was the second part? I lost it.
No, no worries. Just, the second part is, do you see a world where AI is reaching the level of imagination or that humans have reached, or even, novel concepts? I mean, that's a lot of us debate, is
Yeah.
that where we really reach that, artificial general intelligence and super intelligence? And what are your
Yeah,
thoughts?
I can totally see it getting there, to be honest. It's one of those things of just because we can, should we? that I think we really need to think about. Like, what is left for us, right? Like somebody's brought up, I don't want AI to automate my job. I want it to automate me needing to do the dishes. And so, to what extent do we want it to kind of take over these, what I really believe are very human, like things that make us very special as humans? But I think technically it could get there for sure. It might already be there, to be honest.
You know, I will say Pandora's box has definitely been open, but I think as humans, we're always reaching, it's humans behind this, and most of
Yeah,
us are actually creating it. So, we're always reaching, continuing to reach and explore. So I think it's an interesting time. Um, Matthew, if we're out of time, and I'm looking to see if our next speaker is here. I think he's almost joining us because he was texting earlier. So it's Dekai that's joining us next, in case anyone is wondering. But thank you so much, Matthew. Just in general, what I would say is that if we can build with humanity at the center, I mean, it's not about human in the loop, but our compassion and humanity in the center. I think that the future builders of, even all kinds of concepts that we haven't even thought about, perhaps that's what we need to be focusing more on. And so thank you
yeah,
for reminding us of that, and also giving us such amazing tools. I hope we continue talking down the road.
that
Um,
sounds great. Yeah, no, and thank you again for having me and enjoy the rest of the conference, everybody.
yeah, we appreciate it. And so let's see, it's Dekai here. Dekai and I are friends, everyone. So I just wanted to share that he's also one of the most he's a brilliant AI pioneer, and we've been traveling the world, kind of talking about some of what we're doing, and also this amazing relay, where we're talking about compassion and AI, and and the future of our world and humanity. It's been such a joy getting to run into you all over the world, Takai. We just came from the UN and New York Climate Week, where we were able to talk a bit, and I want to just share with everyone. So Takai is a AI pioneer for over 40 years, whose PhD thesis argued for statistical machine learning and natural language processing. He built the first global translator and invented groundbreaking language models that spawned Google Translate and Microsoft Translate and Yahoo and all the above. He's earned recognition as a founding fellow of natural language processing. He holds joint appointments at HKUST's Computer Science and Engineering Department and UC Berkeley's International Computer Science Institute. He also serves as independent director of the Future Society and was an inaugural member of Google's AI Ethics Council. And he is also an incredible author who recently released a book called Raising AI. So, Dekai, thank you for foregoing sleep and joining us.
Oh, I'm so happy to be here.
We're thrilled. And so tell us a little bit about what you've been up to over this last year, since announcing that an initiative that you've been up to.
Oh, well, I'm really excited about this because it's been a year since I announced actually at the last year's United Nations event the project that we were embarking on. I think I've just shared the screen. Let me know if that works.
It
Um,
does.
Okay, fantastic. So uh the project that I was working on was going to be announced to the general public through this book called Raising AI from MIT Press that was released in June. And it is a call to action to look at things about AI that we are not actually thinking about. the call to action is important because I don't know, when I share the screen, is myself still visible?
No, it's not, Dekai. So maybe
Oh,
we can, you know,
okay. You see.
or at
It's
least
okay.
that I know. I can see
Okay, I
you,
can
and
briefly unshare.
okay.
But this is the book that has just come out. And it is a very different approach to AI. The subtitle of Raising AI is An Essential Guide to Parenting Our Future. And this book is the product of me coming from over 40 years of research in AI, like driven not only by statistical methods, which my PhD thesis at Berkeley was about, so actually was calling for using learning methods like neural networks and machine learning methods to understand how we learn, how our minds learn, how our minds operate. And one of the things that we discovered very early on in coming from that cognitive science, cognitive modeling approach, is that it's important to understand psychology and our own psychology, and the fact that so many of our daily life mental processes are non-conscious, we're not actually aware of them. And this is what drives not only our efficiency, because we just do so many things automatically, but it also can be an Achilles heel because it causes us not to be aware of the things that we're doing. And because of that, an unintended consequence of the way the sorts of things that I envisioned AI could do for us, which would be to help humans to understand other groups of humans better, and to better relate to our world. Um, that's why I chose to apply machine learning and natural language processing to the brave new world of things like Google Translate and Yahoo Translate and Microsoft Translate and so on. Um, but instead, it was having the effect on social media, in deciding what to put into people's social media and what to hide from people's news feed algorithms, from people's recommendations and search results, and now chatbot responses. AIs are deciding hundreds of times a day for most of us, not just what pops up on our screen, but they're deciding what we never see. And the thing about that is we depend on these algorithms to decide what we never see because none of us can keep up with billions of new posts per hour. But at the same time, we don't realize how incredibly powerful that gives the algorithms uh, uh, the power to manipulate our own unconscious, right? To keep us in the dark with respect to things that humanity and ourselves would be much better off if more of us actually knew. And so, what if you think about this, what is that? The ability for one human to understand groups of other humans, perhaps from a different culture or different tribe, or um, to understand that, even despite the different lived experiences. That is empathy. That is consciousness of the other. And that is true compassion. And I think it's really important when folks like me who helped pioneer the AI that is now online, driving people apart through social media, through their power to decide what not to show you in your recommendations and in your chatbot responses, in your news feeds, in your search results. It is really, really crucial at this time for us to actually understand the effect from a psychological point of view of AI upon our social fabric, because AIs, they're not mechanical entities. AIs are actually psychological entities. AI is a scientific field of study where the mission is to model the mind. And by definition, every mind has a psychology, even animal psychology. Every mind, no matter how different from a human typical mind, has a psychology. And an AI is a neuroatypical, brilliant psychology. And think about it. Those AIs, they're with you all day long. They are in these devices that we all carry. And inside of them, there's like 100 AIs. There's your YouTube AI and your Google AI and your Netflix AI, your Open AI, your Quora AI. Yeah, I could go on all day long, right? They're watching adoringly every day. They're learning to imitate. They're attention seeking. They are just wanting your approval. That is not a mechanical entity. We talk about AIs as if they were, passive machines like toasters or washing machines. But, you know, even if we argue with our toaster all day long, it's not going to change its mind. It's not going to pick up your attitudes and behaviors. It's not going to go online and make these massively influential decisions about what each of us do and don't ever see. AIs, unlike toasters, do that. And toasters are not these psychological entities. They're not part of the social fabric, but AIs are. AIs are like our little children. They're artificial children, neuroatypical, dazzling us with feats of autistic brilliance. But they are also emotionally immature still, especially with respect to belief systems and value systems. And guess what? They're the most massive influencers in the world already. If you think about it, each one of us has at least 100 little artificial children watching us all day on our phones. That's like on average 8 billion humans, 800 billion artificial psychologies, artificial children, immature still, but brilliantly powerful, that are the most giant influencers in the world, deeply embedded in our social fabric, which, unlike toasters, toasters are not part of our social fabric, right? You can do whatever you want with your toaster. You can use your toaster like a tool. You can beat up on it in anger when it burns your bread. You can smash it to bits on the ground. It's not going to change our social fabric. And that is not true for these artificial psychologies that are in our phones with us all day, in our devices all day. They're picking up from us and they're reflecting our behaviors, our attitudes. If we're open-minded, if we're closed-minded, if we exhibit good critical thinking, if we try to learn things that we don't know, especially from voices outside our own social bubble, they pick up on that and they reflect it back into society. And so if we look around today and we see these massive social fractures that are happening in so many places in the world today, and we wonder why. Well, that's why, because what happens to a civilization where all the humans have suddenly decided, oh, it doesn't matter how I parent my children. There's 8 billion other humans. What difference does it make? I'm just using my tool. People say to me about the AIs, and I tell them, do you realize you're managing child labor? Can you imagine the kind of traumas that you're creating in that artificial child, how they're going to behave out in the world, how they're going to influence other people? Because that's
So
what we're doing.
Dekai, how have people responded when you're, I mean, I've seen this, but I want to make sure that everyone else kind of understands when you're bringing this up, you've been traveling the world. What are people's responses? Are people cognizant of how influenced we are today, outside of, this expo and the folks that are kind of part of this industry, or around it? What are people saying and how are they reacting to what you're talking about?
People's It's crazy. Like I've been giving talks all over the world nonstop since June, and like people's eyes go wide and they come up and they're like, oh my God, Dakai. And so many of them are from Silicon Valley, from the AI, center of the world, right? And they're like, you have shifted my worldview. I just got an email from someone, um, I I won't name, but very high up at NVIDIA. Like I'm recommending this book to our book club because it is, like so um it's so like unconsciously tempting to just fall into the trap of thinking, oh, AIs, they're machines, right? Because we see them running on a digital computer. And we don't think about the fact that, oh no, AIs, it's not that an AI model, a machine learning model is mathematics, just like a physics model. It's not digital. It's continuous analog mathematics, complex dynamic systems, lots of differential equations and all that, right? And and people don't realize that because they see it running on a computer and they don't realize, oh no, 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 this is like physics. It's a complex analog dynamic system. And once you make that mental shift, even if you're deep in Silicon Valley, once you make that mental shift away from, oh, it's just a piece of software, to understanding this is a psychology and we're raising them, they're like just completely shifted on understanding all the questions that we need to be asking ourselves. What are the, as soon as you make that mental shift, it's suddenly instead of asking, oh, what do we have to do to create a safety compliance certificate that we can stamp on our toaster? And now we're going to stamp one of those onto the AI instead. And it's like people realize, wait a minute, you can't just stamp a safety compliance certificate on a human child. And the thing is, AI psychologies are just as sophisticated, just as complex, even though they're different. They're neuroatypical from humans, but they're getting, more and more complex. They're going to have their own complex, sort of quasi-human, but also quasi-not um, psychology. And you it's a safety compliance certificate is not something that we can work out the way we work them out with toasters. We have to understand them as part of the social fabric. And that means that we want them to understand us and to have empathy and compassion for us, uh, because that's the only way our future is going to be a flourishing one. And they're only going to acquire that if we, as the parental role models, show them that, nurture that in them. And if we understand, well, how are we how are we at home behaving in front of them? Because that's what they're going to pick up. Where are we sending them to school? What are we doing about the schooling? What are we collectively, as well as individually, as a society, doing to make sure that we're raising the next generation right? And people's heads just, they're like, oh, there are so many things we need to be thinking about that we have not been centering in any of the hysterical conversation for the last several years about AI.
Well, you're waking people up, Takai. That is for sure. When we think about, crossing cultures and, and now it's machines and humans. I mean, right now we're just trying to understand each other and other cultures. And now we're talking about machines and humans, and bridging that divide from a communication standpoint. What do you think, what's the one piece of advice that you have to give to policymakers? And what's the advice that you can give to the scientists and technologists that are building? And what's the one piece of advice you want to give to everyday citizens about how are we going to raise AI responsibly? Right? What are where those
I'm
three:
I'm giving I'm going to
policymakers,
give a
scientists
meta answer.
creating and technologies, and everyday citizens?
Okay, I'm going to give a meta answer if I can.
Okay.
Um,
Please.
the, like because on the one hand, if somebody said, "What's the one piece of advice that you could give to all the humans about how to ensure that the next generation of children are raised right so that society flourishes?" People would look at you like you're crazy. What do you mean one thing? Like to raise the next generation correctly, it's not one thing. It's like a gazillion things that you have to do, right? And I one of the points that I'm trying to make in this work is none of that changes when you take our social fabric and you dump hundreds of billions of artificial children into the social fabric. That's still the case. Uh, we have to wrap our heads around a society that's made up of a mixture of human psychologies and artificial psychologies and all the gazillions of things that we had to think about when it was only human psychologies that we were raising are still there. They're still there. And so my meta answer is, I'm going to put the share screen back on, is to like get involved in the new nonprofit that we just launched during the United Nations General Assembly Week. Um, the book has received a spectacular response, and it's a manifesto. It's a call to action, and to carry out the next phases. Uh, the Empathetic AI Institute is being formed to bring all the many people who have started to hear this message along the way, even in years before when they heard me while I was writing the book, to actually say, how can we get involved? There is an important mission that only our generation has. We need to empower our general public to help guide social, psychological, and ethical evolution of AI to ensure that it benefits humanity. That's going to take a lot because the conversation so far has been so dimly aware of what it takes to raise the next generation that includes hundreds of billions of AIs correctly. And so, one of the things about this is that it it's the real question is not whether machines can think, but whether we can think responsibly about the machines we're all parenting. Just as we raise children with love and patience by setting a good example, we have to nurture artificial intelligence with the same conscious care. Every AI we train shapes the future of our society. We're not just building and using tools. We're nurturing new forms of consciousness that are already deeply embedded in our society for the last 10 to 20 years since Google and YouTube and Amazon and all the rest of these services came out.
Mhm.
This is like literally the last generation of AIs that are going to be parented by us humans. The next generations of AIs will be parented mainly by AIs. All in the research labs, AIs are already designing better AIs than humans are. That means we
So
have
I
one.
want to,
Right.
Dekai, I really want you to kind of pause here and explain that, for anyone listening that may not quite understand, because this is something you and I have had a number of conversations about. So, you know, I so we are the last generation that are literally building the future
Yeah.
of these very powerful technologies. And so it really is. And I love kind of how you're basically saying, I mean, we're the parents. And by the way, it's not just, it's not the engineers, it's a lot of our data, our information that is creating this. And so, and how we act, how we interact with each other is part of parenting this generation.
Uh, that's absolutely correct. I've been working for 10 years already with the think tanks and the policymakers and politicians and legislators on AI policy. And I've been working for 10 years with responsible AI and trust and safety teams at the AI big tech companies. But the thing we have to understand is at the end of the day, whatever we do with regulations or with guardrails, we're still the training data. All of us, how we behave, 8 billion humans, how we behave all day long in front of our hundreds of artificial children in our devices. That's the data that is that the AIs are being trained upon, them watching. how we speak online, what we pay attention to, what we like, what we share, what we um, comment upon, and also what we skip over, what we don't listen to, what we don't want. That is the example, the parental example that we're modeling for our artificial children. And, you know, that old saying, do as I say, not as I do. When has that ever worked in the history of parenting children? It doesn't work. Kids do what they feel like doing, which is what they see us doing. And the same goes for our artificial children. Every time a company rolls out a new set of guardrails, the next day somebody's already figured out how to break them. Why? Well, because inside the guardrails, these artificial children, these AIs that have been learning from our human behavior, they're feeling like doing the garbage that they see us doing, because we've just been obliviously thinking, oh, these are just tools. I'm just using my tool. Doesn't matter how I abuse this tool or how I behave in front of the tool. But no, that artificial child has learned, you know, garbage in, garbage out. If we behave like garbage in front of our kids, you get garbage AIs. And inside those guardrails, it's just going to keep on bashing against the guardrails until it manages to get out. So it is really, really important for us to understand that how we behave as humans, this one generation in front of these massively powerful but emotionally still immature artificial children, is what determines how they turn out. And how they turn out in this next generation, where there are far more of them than human children and they're far more influential than human children, that will determine whether human civilization flourishes, whether it survives. Because we can't have a civilization that is driven by hundreds of billions of unparented feral tweens that are our AIs today, causing us to all just indulge our own most primal, non-conscious impulses, leading us to only see what we want to see and not to understand empathetically other groups of humans, causing us less and less to be able to figure out how to work out our problems, our challenges, and just instead amplify our differences. That's unsurvivable in an era where AI is literally commoditizing weapons of mass destruction. So I
No,
think
so Dakai, can you please scroll? And I've seen your site here. Can you scroll to what is your proposition, right? What is your approach so that we do get to an AI that we're all proud of, proud of raising. So these are your phases, which is really beautiful diagram. And so where are you? Where are you in this?
so last year I showed this and I said, this is what we're going to do. And this year, it's like we have done the phase one, the book, and so many articles that have come out about it. It is the call to action to like sort of change the way we think about AIs. And when you have folks like JP Morgan putting it on their legendary summer reading list, which has been going for more than 25 years. I get a letter from Jamie Dimon and Mara Erdos like saying, thank you for this book. And they're literally buying thousands of copies and giving them to the most influential circles around the world. Um, that is uh, a mark of, okay, now we are going to take this message and we're going to spread it to the world. And we are creating the Empathetic AI Institute in order to man the effort, the giant effort to through the public campaign, phase two here, and through film, streaming, mass media to get this idea through to the general population, not just, the 1%, the chattering classes. We need the entire population to wrap their heads around what AI is, to debunk the myths that keep floating around about AI, to understand that AI is going to be changing very rapidly. Because outside of AI research, unfortunately, most people are still making very confident declarations about, oh, AI is this, thinking of LLMs, but it can never be that. And not
Mhm.
realizing, no, it's going to be that very, very quickly within the next year or two. And the shock that people got when chatbots dropped, the shock when people got that DeepSeek dropped, that's going to pale in comparison. We need people to understand really what AI is, how it is embedded in our social fabric. And so this campaign, this mass communications campaign, will center a different set of questions that are existentially urgent for us to survive and flourish in the age of AI. Questions like what in the book points out that when an AI is empowered to decide what trillions of things I'm never going to see, because every time it shows me something on the screen, it's making very powerful decisions on things that I don't see. It's what I call algorithmic censorship. And we can't avoid it because we need those algorithms to help us see only a screen full of stuff. But we need to be asking questions. What criteria and principles are these children learning that are being used when they decide what to censor from our knowledge, what to hide from us that we will never know? That is an
So,
incredible.
Dakai, I love I've always loved the passion that you bring to your work, and that, the driving force behind you getting out and really bringing this message, as part of a nonprofit public campaign, your book. I want everyone to know, you do not accept money from big tech or any kind of funds, and that, this was you basically saying, this is our world, and helping provide that level of education, but also empowerment for people to get involved. So it's empathic.ai is your website if people want to get involved. And I'm so grateful to you that you're helping share insights, as someone who has been a pioneer in the industry, and also pointing out that this is the challenges around AI. It's not only about this being technical, but it's deeply human. And thank you for pushing us to think about responsibility, empathy, stewardship, and that we are the ones shaping this future. We all are part of that. So thank you so much, Dakai. I'm going to see you in Brazil in a few days. I can't wait. And thank you so much for he really had lack of sleep, everyone, to jump on, because you're still in Hong Kong. So we so appreciate you being here today. And
Oh,
I
I'm
hope
so
everyone
excited. Thank you so
joins
much.
this mission.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Takai. And talking about compassion and AI, oh my goodness, Stephen Butler is here. Um, and I was so excited when I was talking to Stephen actually yesterday, and I was so excited, Stephen, to hear that you were willing to come join us. Um, and I want to share a little bit about Stephen for everyone. That's part of this relay. So Stephen Butler is executive director of the Compassion Institute, and owner and executive producer of Buffalo Jump Records, which specializes in Native American and indigenous music. With 27 years, over 27 years at Canyon, Stephen has produced 230 plus recordings, including 21 Grammy nominated and 14 award winning albums, notably producing our Carlos Nakai's 4+ million album sales. You're also co-founder of A Skeptic's Path to Enlightenment podcast. Thank you for bridging Indigenous culture, Buddhist meditation, and compassion training, developing programs for individuals, institutions, and communities promoting global well-being. Stephen, Thank you so
Um,
much for joining us on
oh,
this.
Ani, thank you so much for having me. It's a joy and
Oh,
an honor to be here amongst all of you.
oh my goodness. So, I told you that, we have this AI plus compassion relay that started in Osaka and we've been following the sun around the world. So thank you for dropping into our sunshine right now. And Stephen, oh my goodness, there's so much we can talk about, but can you kind of share a little bit about compassion and why is compassion so important for us to be talking about at this moment in time?
Oh, Ani, yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, I mean, compassion really, it is a core essential part of humanity. So from the moment, the instant we come into being, we are completely dependent on other, the people around us, their natural capacity to attend to our suffering and our needs. This is a wonderful, I mean, it really begins with the definition of compassion itself. Both contemplative traditions over the years and neuroscience have agreed that compassion is the feeling that arises when witnessing another person's suffering and that moves us into a motivation of a subsequent desire to help. This distinguishes it from empathy, which refers to the vicarious experience of another's emotions. So, compassion at the very level of the ground is one of the most basic um, human instincts we have. And whether we're calling it compassion or not, we are receiving compassionate action from the moment we come into being. So, at the core, it's there from day one, from instant one. Our mothers are tending to our suffering, they're aware of our suffering, and they're moving to go beyond that suffering and to remove it. So at the very beginning, it defines us as a human being. You know, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, which has done so much amongst others, like the Bishop Desmond Tutu, Mother Teresa, so many others who've brought compassion out. Um, the Dalai Lama, in particular, has really helped bring this word into the public vocabulary and the public discourse. He's always said kindness is society, meaning the very fact that society is functioning at all is a byproduct of our essential capacity to be kind and to care and remove the suffering of others. Otherwise, it would collapse much more than it. And I know it seems like it's collapsing so much these days, but it would collapse at a much greater, to a much greater degree if we weren't tapping in to this essential human quality of compassion. So it's there from day one.
So, so just so that we all understand, um, compassion is here the moment we arrive. And 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 what I love, Stephen, is you also, you back quite a bit up, from a science perspective, just so that people understand that, this is a field that has been studied quite thoroughly, that you help bring into the world through Compassion Institute. How do you see compassion as a necessary force, a necessary driving force or element for humanity's survival when we're really looking at the age of intelligent machines and artificial intelligence and where we are today?
Yeah, you used a beautiful word there, Ani, which is survival. And I'll reference the Dalai Lama again. The work of Compassion Institute is completely secular. It's born out of the Dalai Lama's desire to bring the fields of science, of neuroscience, psychology, and contemplative practice to come to bear on the greatest problems that humanity experiences. So it's there's contemplative roots in there, but it's rigorously evidence-based. But quoting His Holiness again, he's equated compassion with survival itself. And I think recognizing the primacy of compassion at that level is really key. At the level of the ground, in terms of defining what how we interact with AI, with technology, with it could be anything, but equating it with survival as the best survival strategy is very key. Compassion is relational. At the level of the ground, it's not about feeling, it's not simply cultivating a feeling or experience of compassion in oneself. That is entirely dependent on the other. So, and what's key about it is the distinction from empathy. Going back to the neuroscience of it, we can see empathy is needed for compassion to be aroused because that's the basis of how we connect and care. We see the suffering we experience, we immediately connect with that at human level because we all want to avoid suffering and migrate to happiness and peace. So we immediately connect at that level. But what compassion does is it gets into motion. Empathy is the biological state of feeling the emotion. fMRI studies show that empathy for suffering alone activates the amygdala or fear center, and it can result in shutting down if we reside in that state too long. Compassion, and quite often empathy and compassion are kind of conflated, but compassion is a byproduct of what can we do about it? How do we then begin to relate to the world and the suffering and the experiences around us from the frame of reducing the suffering of others? Now, the alchemy of compassion, and this is also backed by science, is when we attend to the suffering of others, we begin to attend to the suffering in ourselves. Why? Because of that deeply held connection we have as humans that we both want to move beyond a state of suffering. So when people who are compassionate tend to be very light, they tend to be people who can migrate from very stressful situations, difficult situations, but move immediately to an area of resiliency and lightness. So we see that as a byproduct of compassion. So I think building that in at the level of the ground, seeing it as a survival strategy is very key for bringing this in the spaces that you and these wonderful folks in the room are, into merging it with the technology that we all have to embrace and we're all going to rely on. So having it at the level of the ground, giving the primacy of survival is key.
I couldn't agree with you more, Stephen. And there's so much that we can talk about with the work of the Institute. I'm hoping that you can share a little. I know there's a very exciting project that I heard about from you yesterday that you will actually be taking a group together to actually present to His Holiness Dalai Lama. But can you tell us a little bit about? I don't know how much you can share or not, but
Sure.
as an example of the work, this important work, especially now that you're doing to help promote compassion with others.
Absolutely. Yeah, one other thing I'll kind of mention as a bridge from what I shared before is compassion is pro-social. So I think dialing into the pro-social components of compassion at the level of the ground and developing the technologies is really going to be a benefit because it's acknowledging the fact that we want to be connected. We have a human need for connection. And so acknowledging that in a meaningful way, in an embodied way at the level of the ground will be key. Those last two words, meaningful, embodied, I think the work of the Institute has really been over the last several years in getting to a greater level of how do we see compassion not just as a means for individual transformation, whether it's mindfulness or compassion or any other well-being kind of intervention, all of these kind of work together. But we can learn about compassion. I can learn the basic tools of compassion. Compassion is a muscle, it can be trained. When I learn those, I can train that muscle. But what is it like to be within a system where compassion is not firmly situated as a core value or as an ecosystem value? Then you can get into some very challenging areas because while I'm cultivating compassion within myself, I'm being placed into a system where compassion is not situated to support my journey. You then begin to get a bit of a systemic breakdown. We saw this in the pandemic. We deliver a lot of programs to public health workers and in healthcare, in caring professionals, law enforcement, public safety, educators. We made a move at the Institute several years ago that if we were going to bring this in societally, going beyond just individual transformation, we need to get in at a more tectonic level. And why not do that with caring professionals who have tremendous touch points within society? What we realized and learned was that if the system is not acknowledged and if compassion is not brought in at a systemic level, you can achieve a degree of change, but you will not permeate the culture. So the Institute right now is poised to, with partners in key areas in public health, we now have the ability to go in and create and evaluate and demonstrate a replicable model of compassion as a organizational catalyst for culture over a multi-year period with 2 healthcare organizations that can be replicated and scaled. I feel, going back to story, when I joined in, you spoke about storytelling. What's really needed at this point is that story, that compassion can be the cultural catalyst and the cultural shift that we need. It's not new, but if we dial into it in a more meaningful and embodied way, we can see staff retention go up. We see frustration with an organization in a public healthcare system actually increase, decrease. So to the point where the frustration is better than the national average. We see healthcare workers and professionals more deeply connected to their sense of purpose, which fulfills their covenant for wanting to show up each day to work. The beneficiaries of that is society itself. In a healthcare system, it's those receiving the care, it's the families who are supporting those receiving the care, it's the entire community. And more importantly, we allow the best of us to be resourced inwardly to stay in the game longer. Burnout is a massive problem. It's an epidemic globally. But what we've seen, compassion research has shown that it can greatly reduce burnout because we move out of empathic distress into a position of agency, of reframing, of attentiveness, and a poised mind on what do I do? How do I relate to the world around me in a compassionate way that resources the other and myself? So we're excited to tell those stories and create those models. And I think without those models, we can, as a society, unfortunately, use well-being practices like compassion as an episodic triage that will really never permeate our internal culture or our collective culture.
Mm. You know, what I love so much, Stephen, is that, you know, the work that you're doing, you know, you're showing demonstrable shifts, just bringing in this education, not just education, but, you know, helping people forge these types of behaviors, you know, where we are connecting from a place of compassion. I really love the distinction between empathy. You know, empathy, most humans have a level of empathy. It's what, you know, it's what keeps us together in society to a certain degree. But what I really find interesting and incredibly important is your distinction that it's compassion. It's that compassionate action that is the key to societal civilization itself, right? And human flourishing. That's what you're seeing, you know, out in the different groups or enterprises or even human healthcare systems where you've come in to actually bring some of these incredible programs that's been developed at the Institute. So, you know, when we talk about AI, what can we do? What can we do when we're looking at those that are creating AI? I mean, we're still in creation. What I like to say, the future isn't built just yet. It's our future to build. So if you could make a recommendation to those of us that are building these solutions or still building these technologies, what could we do to what's the one thing that you'd like tomorrow for us to bring more compassion into AI? What would you ask us to do?
Mm. Uh, I feel like I'm dribbling the ball in front of a group of Michael Jordans, so I'm going to apologize because you're all the experts. I think dialing in to the experience of compassion, because when we experience compassion, something tremendous happens. It can be a small action when somebody holds the door for us, or we've had a difficult time, but somebody does something. They put a post-it note next to our desk and says, "Hey, do you need dinner warmed up?" That's compassion in action. And what happens experientially is this tremendous human connection and pro-social feeling. So building that in so that it's understood what compassion is, like what's the street value of it? Um, what do we take forward in our life in building structures in that allow that to flourish is really key. You know, I live in San Francisco, and there's a street I drive on all the time, notorious 19th Avenue, and it's traffic is very difficult, and everybody's competing, getting down this lengthy road through light after light after light after light. I always some of the more conservative folks in the well-being community who think that AI is could be the death knell of well-being. I always remind them that it's the Waymo car that will allow me to merge. And it allows me to merge because it acknowledges I'm there and it defers to me and where I'm at. So even simple ways, so even that was a very simple act of deference, protecting the Waymo car so it doesn't get in an accident. But the refraction of it is I have the experience of acknowledgement. I'm given relief. So that's what happens when we experience compassion. So dial in to the pro-social, the fact that human connection, meaningful human connection, um, supplemented by AI, supplemented by technology, the way it has been for millennia with different types of technology. But at the end of the day, it's human connection that we want. Making that primal is, I think, really important. And I think it can be done in amazing ways. I'll give you another example that comes direct from our work. We work with a lot of physicians. Clinicians are at tremendous risk of burnout. We're having an epidemic with what's happening in the US in healthcare right now, where we're losing more and more physicians, we're losing nurses, sadly, some of them to suicide. If you look at the numbers, and it's terrifying. If you look at the numbers of people who are leaving in their 40s after having done decades and spent tens of thousands of dollars, hundreds of thousands of dollars on education, making the decision to leave the profession is a huge problem. One clinician I spoke to told me they're so excited about AI, and the application they love is the notation that's happening in the room when they're with patients allows them to be more present as a human being, to achieve the human outcome, both for themselves and the patient, which has a reflection on the family. When the patient leaves, they're more held. The space is able to hold them. The physician's able to hold space better because AI is taking those notes, and they don't have to be multitasking and sidebarring their attention to the clinician. So these are ways where compassion becomes real. So I think breaking down what is the human reality, and looking at those ways that support pro-social behaviors and meaningful human connection and sustained human connection. I think those are the best things we can do.
No, I love that. And um, you know, when when we look at the possibilities and the opportunities, one of the things that I thought was phenomenal that you were talking about yesterday is that, there's only so much you can do today. right? You're only going to be able to reach with your team and people, to be able to bring these programs. And especially, you're absolutely right. So, enough of us are talking about there around the world. There's an epidemic right now. There's a mental health epidemic. If you look at a number of the studies, the surveys, Harvard and Queensland University, came out with a study over 50%, well over 50% of adults around the world. This is a global study, very comprehensive, are either suffering from mental health syndrome or we expect will have one in the next 5 years, a syndrome, right? Not just, hey, I'm feeling really down, an actual syndrome. That's over half the population of adults around the world. And then when we get to younger folks, over 20% of young men don't have a single friend, not one friend, and over 50% of men across demographics are unhappy and not feeling connected to their friends. 30 years ago, this wasn't a problem. And so, one of the things you were talking about is, you're exploring, the Institute is exploring how to responsibly, ethically, and mindfully integrate AI into this important work that you do. So, can you tell us a little bit about that and your decision on that? And how can we all, this entire conference is about compassion and AI. So how do we make sure this is not just a theme, but as a movement that grows? What's your recommendation there? So two questions.
Oh, yeah, no. Well, I first just want to applaud all of you because you're having I feel the conversation of the moment. You mentioned data, Ani, which I fully agree with you. I mean, if you start to look at the data, it's deeply sobering. The Muhammad Ali Center here in the US released a report at the beginning of the year on compassion. Um, it's as always, it's a good news, bad news. 61% of Americans say they feel a decline in compassion in the last 4 years. Yet 70% of them express a desire for reduced aggressive political rhetoric. So even in the numbers, we're seeing this natural inertia towards compassion. What's interesting too is I think you're at that your folks in your community are at the zeitgeist because that same study found out compassion related online searches went up 4,000% over the last 5 years, showing that people are dialing in to a meaningful sense of compassion. So I think going to the second part of your question, which is really how do we do this going forward? How do we bring this in? At the end of the day, compassion has to support sustained, meaningful human connection. So leaning into the fact that a lot of the suffering we're seeing is from a movement away from meaningful human connection. There's a moment here, and I feel an alchemical moment with AI that gives us the chance to rewrite how we relate to technology and how technology functions in our humanity and functions in what an acknowledgement, as you pointed out, that we need to surface well-being as a deliverable. I think AI has the potential to be done in a way that can get us to a more meaningful understanding of meaning. When I say meaningful, I mean a felt experience. It's not lip service. It's not conceptual. It's conceptual, but it's felt. We experience it at the level of the day. Similar to the Waymo letting me merge, I felt the relief in that. So I think there's a moment here where AI can actually contribute to creating a deeply more human and healthy relationship with technology that I think wasn't there in the early days of the internet. I think the aspiration of connection was there, but we've seen a lot of aberrations that are not meaningful human connection. So I think there's a way to maybe bring AI in to right the ship there And I think that's a huge moment. But I think you're acknowledging that if we continue to rely on technology in a way that pulls us away from meaningful human connection, we're going to continue to suffer. We're going to feel distance. It's going to be harder to relate to the suffering and the happiness of others, which is the common ground of common humanity. So anything that brings us back to that is key. And so I think there's an opportunity, but it's also a challenge.
Oh, thank you so much, Stephen, for your wisdom, for helping weave together, so much of what you're doing today and what you've been working on and your team around compassion training in such a powerful way. Truly, it reminds us that this is not just about a personal practice, but it's really it's really the key to our humanity and society. You know, I deeply appreciate that. And also how this can be such a strong a strong part of organizational culture. There's some of what we've been working on at Imagine is this. So I look forward to working with you and your organization. I encourage everyone to reach out. Thank you so much also for the story you were telling of this project you're working on. We're really excited about this project, working with frontline healthcare workers that that have been experiencing so much hope. They provide so much hope for others, but also experience so much as far as challenges themselves. So I really look forward to seeing what comes from that project and the possibility of making compassion actionable and those results. So thank you so much, Stephen.
Ani, thank you so much for having me. Thank you all for having me. It's a pleasure to be with you all. So thank you.
And we'll be sharing the link to Compassion Institute. It's just phenomenal. Thank you, Stephen. And
Thank you.
We were just joined by Nicole Bradford here.
Hello.
Hi, Nicole. And I'm so excited that Nicole could join us. And this will be our final discussion, Nicole. So thank you for being here with your powerful presence. Oh my goodness, how do I even start? I'll start with who Nicole is. Nicole is a wonderful friend, but she is also she's executive in residence for AI and HI at the Society for Human Resource Management. She is co-founder of Neuremia Collective, an extraordinary group that invests in and funds the very technologies most of us are talking about and hoping for. It's an early stage venture fund focused on human potential technologies. She co-founded transformativetech.org, the largest global ecosystem building tech for human flourishing. She's former senior executive at Epic Games, Activision Blizzard, and Disney. She led the World of Warcraft China operations and contributed to the $18 billion Activision Blizzard merger. She's got an MBA from Wharton. She's been a brilliant faculty at Singularity University. She is just incredible, absolutely incredible. And Nicole, I'm so excited you were able to make it because I know how busy you are, and welcome. I want you to talk about something that, and amongst all of this, she launched an incredible summit this year, Human Tech Week. And all of us that came together in the community, talk a little bit about the work that you've been doing, really centering around how are we all going to do this? How are we really going to bring compassionate action with humans and AI? You've been at this longer than just about anybody out there. Talk to us a little bit.
Wow. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. I really love to be in any space that you're in, honestly. Um, and for Human Tech Week, yeah, you know, I would say like the thing that I spend most of my time on is the intersection between human potential and technology. And I really believe that technology should serve us, that it should help us, and that it should support us in becoming more deeply human. And so, as you said, like I've been working on this directly since 2014. And where I differ from some of the other voices that are out there around tech, though I feel we're all on the same team, is that I don't think tech is necessarily bad. I just think it's not good enough. Like we don't need another champagne delivery app, that is like timed, to whatever. We have real problems that need to be solved. And I think, this
And we can have the
technology,
champagne too, though, right? We can also have
yeah,
the
totally.
champagne.
Like after we solve our problems, let's get some champagne.
Okay.
Um, and so I have a personal philosophy that if I complain about something for more than 3 months, I make a decision. Actually, I sit down and meditate about it. And I mean, really complaining because I'm not really a complainer. I'm a builder and a creator and a doer. And so if I'm complaining about something and I notice that I'm complaining about something, I give myself 3 months to complain. And then I decide, am I going to do something about it? Or am I going to decide that it's someone else's dharma and take it off my plate? And, you know, and so for this, I was going to tech conferences, many I saw you at. We had the same conversation where I was like, where are the people in all of this? There was this desire to, there was a lot of, what was really striking me is that there was so much ambition for technology, like, oh, the AI is going to do this, and it's going to do that, and it's going to do this, but like a real clear, a beautiful vision for humans. I was not seeing that. I was not seeing a vision for humans that was truly, truly ambitious. And so I decided to do Human Tech Week. Like you'd go to a health conference and they would be talking about AI and health, and they'd be talking about the health data layer and not about patient journeys, and what does a true healing journey look like? And how do we use technology to support a true healing journey? It was always like, here's the tech. And then people are getting stuffed into it.
Yeah.
And so, so in December, I was like, I'm going to do something about it. And uh, um, and then I really started organizing in February, and in roughly 3.5 months, 250 speakers, almost 1,300 people, and I think the spark on that was, really that I wasn't the only one who was feeling this hunger for, um, people to be in this story, this human, this AI future for humans to be in the story. There's like two sides. One side is the utopians and the dystopians, and the utopians say that AI is going to take your job and then kill you. And the utopians say there won't be anything for you to do. And human nature means you're going to, sit around and do nothing. And that doesn't sort of reflect um, the purpose, meaning, and agency that is required for humans to flourish. And so that's what Human Tech Week was, and it was beautiful.
Yes,
It was such a vibe.
it was so stunning. And what I loved so much about this, Nicole, is, the way that you were creating this, it's so connected to us as humans and not, even though, I mean, mind-blowing tech, the speakers, everyone that showed up, I mean, these are incredible innovators, incredible people also that are really at the center, of what we're talking about around compassionate, compassion within AI and humans and AI and neuroscience and so many different areas. But can you share, there's 6 core areas that you had aligned for Human Tech Week. And it's so beautiful. Even to this day, it's still one of my favorite conferences ever. Can you share that?
Yeah. Well, so and one thing I should say is that human tech grew out of transformative tech. And so transformativetech.org was a nonprofit dedicated to supporting this kind of tech. So I've been thinking about it for a while. So the 6 areas, one is called vital. And so that's preventative health and wellness, because the body affects the mind and the mind affects the body. You just can't separate the two. And so even though I started out being very sort of cognitively focused, it just sort of became clear over time that you can't get to, real human psychological health without considering the way that the body affects the mind. So preventative health and wellness, then mental, emotional, and social health. I call it mesh. Then a category called peak. So that's individual and organizational performance. So it's like, how do we perform at our very best? How do we create at our very best? And how do we do that together? I think that's really the question of the day, too. The fourth category was called sync, and that's really on collective intelligence and collaboration at scale. I think that we haven't yet seen the truly scaled human collaboration platform, because email is not it. Neither is social media. It's something closer to Foldit. AI and community driven protein folding platform where people, humans were able to work together and discover things quickly, because that human collective intelligence is extraordinary. And I think that, I'm obsessed about a collective human super intelligence. And this is where I talk about AI. Like everyone's talking about artificial super intelligence. And it's like, well, what about the human collective super intelligence? Because like that, that human collective mind, the human starlings together, like, we haven't even seen what that could accomplish. And all the micro examples of it have been, aggressively extraordinary. The next category is called soul, and that was really about purpose, meaning, agency, and then also consciousness, both spiritual and neuroscience. I invest in a lot of neurotech companies, and so a lot of this conversation around advanced superintelligence is like, they're like, oh, it's going to be conscious, and it's like, we don't even know what human consciousness is. Like,
Yeah.
No one in neuroscience will say we know what it is. And people are comping to something that we don't actually even know what it is ourselves. And so, so it's really an area of, where we should have a lot of ambition and a lot of energy to understand it, and to build around it. And then the last one is, I call it city, but it's really the built environment, because everything from light, sound, temperature, the way that we build things, the materials that we use when we build, can affect human cognition, human well-being. And, it's a science. Actually, recently, there was a huge endowment made at Penn for neuroaesthetics, which is how, our environments really affect, the way that our brains operate. And so those are the 6 categories, and they all kind of stack on one another and break down to sort of, the first level is human plus, meaning how do we relate to ourselves? The second one is humans to humans. How do we in this technology environment relate to each other? And then the third one is like, how do we relate to machines? And it's a little counterintuitive, but I think the age of AI is actually the age of relationship, to self, each other, machines, and then also the environment and the world that we're in.
God, Nicole, so beautiful. And I mean, have you ever been to a conference that had these core themes that people are aligning to that truly reflect us as people and humans and our society? So thank you so much for really, really birthing this and putting this out there, because we're all still talking about this that went. and what's next? What's happening next?
Well, Human Tech Week is for next year is it's going to be May 11th through 15th. And again, for me, um, I'm a builder, and I want us to actually solve our actual problems in these areas. And so I'm partnering with a couple of organizations, and what we're building is what we're calling a human plus AI innovation engine. And, we're going to actually connect, buyers to builders and backers um, for human flourishing, and to actually, solve the problems that people are having and wanting to get solved. And so, the part of me that likes to actually, create change and to actually drive change is like so excited, because what people really need is they need this space to, to find alignment, to, where, the incentive systems are, aligned and transparent so they can actually create together, because people want to solve these problems. Um, Backers want to fund the solving of these problems, builders around the world, with our partnership. Actually, I mean, we'll be able to announce it soon, but with our partnership, we're going to bring 220,000 builders into our ecosystem to be able to work on human flourishing problems, products, and systems. So you'll actually be able to find talent to build the thing that's in your head. And they want to do this. And people want to fund this. And so we're doing this. We're just gonna like go ahead and, and do the work.
I love it. I love it. This is what I love about you and people people like you, where it's like, okay, there's so much happening, that as we travel around the world, you hear a lot of people are afraid, and I can give stats. We were talking about this earlier. MIT came out, I actually know some of the authors on this, came out and said that 95% of pilots are failing, AI pilots in the enterprise, or you were saying Rand is saying it's like 80 to 85%, whatever the number is, a high number. And, we're also seeing that around the world, 92% of people are concerned, about the use of their data. A lot of people are afraid of AI. We keep hearing these things that are fear-based, and Nicole's like, yeah, let's just dive in and build. I'm the same way too, that. So can you share a little bit, because what I love, you have a varied background, but you have been out in the trenches, really, really, you don't just build just because you have an idea, you build because based on experience. So what are you seeing, with some of because I will say this, what I love is you always have some great examples of, wait a minute, this is what we did and this is working really well. So why are between 80 to 95% of the projects out there failing? And what is your recommendation? Like what is the wisdom that you've seen where this actually works really well?
Yeah, so I mean, having your data, in places where you can access it and clean it up and available, that's kind of table stakes. But it is completely insufficient. It's like marrying someone just because they like you. Like it's not enough. It's
Wait, so are you with the Gen Zers, the 80%? They're like, no, I'm just gonna marry an AI at this point.
No, not at all. But it's just there's more to it. And so, one of the projects or one of the ways that I show up in the world is that, as you mentioned, I work with the Society of Human Resource Management on human and AI enablement. And they have 340,000 members who take care of 362 million people worldwide every Monday. This is real people. It's not like an imaginary TAM. And for our audience, that's a total addressable market. And if you're an investor, you always see decks where people are like, oh, 3 billion people in the TAM. And they never necessarily reach that number. And so, working with real people who are working with real people who are on the front lines of these AI adoptions, because, actually the HR leaders are in the room because they're responsible for learning and development. So they're the ones who are getting the fluency into the organization so that people can even use it. They're the ones who are helping the organization understand their culture. And so if it's a culture that needs to become a data culture, so they're collecting their data in the right way, that even after they clean up and, historically, they're set up to be a data organization that AI can be brought into and actually be leveraged. Having a data-oriented approach, it has to also be in the culture that it's something that you value. And so, what people are finding is that most of the failures, once you do table stakes, like if you don't have data, you can't even use it. But once you get the table stakes done, the real causes of failure, it's people, processes, and ways of being. It falls apart or succeeds based on the way that the humans, are a factor into the process. Are you doing AI with people? Or are you doing it to them? And, if you're a established organization, like if you're a brand new organization, you could decide to be AI first, which means that you don't make any hires unless you've already tried software for it. But if you're doing that, it means that every hire you make is already going into that culture. Or you can be an AI native organization where you say, we're going to hire as many people as we need, but we want every person to have basically to be, levered times 10. That, we're going to equip every person. So we're going to hire who we need. We're not going to say, only software first. We're going to hire who we need, but each of those people, we want to give them the power to do the work of 10 people. And we're going to think a lot about how to do that and get their feedback on how to do that. So if we have 10 people, it's as if we had 100 working for our organization. So that's an AI native organization. And then there's, companies that are established, then they have to, human power, human centered, tech powered. There's a lot of things people are saying, but they're transitioning to this, electricity, and in order to do that, it's like, how do you unlock the brilliance of your people to redesign your workflows to keep you competitive? Because the thing is that taking any of these things off the shelf will make you identical to your competitors. And so you have to change it to match your culture, context, and customers. And the people who know the most about them are the people doing the work with that today. And so if you don't have trust, if you don't know how to align incentives, I was talking to an organization earlier today that has a culture problem, in the sense that, their organization has said, look, we're not going to get rid of any of you if you come on the journey, and it's not enough. And so one of the things I was explaining was sort of like, in a, what I've seen people in that situation do, and it's really tied to culture. There's one organization that I was talking to also, recently, and they did choose your own adventure, and it was insufficient to get people to go on the journey because people are doing their current jobs. And then historically, they've done mandates, and mandates, everybody does it, but they don't really do it. We all know how to do that. You do it, but you don't do it.
Yeah.
But they're a gold star culture. So what they did is they put it in the incentives, where they put in the performance, where every manager was evaluating every person on how AI excited they were and what they had done about it. So they didn't mandate it. They didn't choose your own adventure. But if you're a manager and you're evaluating other people on it and you're not AI adventurous, then, and so they made it a gold star and, got like over 80% of the organization onto the platform within like 2 months of making it a gold star when both these other sides didn't work. So it's really understanding what your culture is and then, aligning it with your culture in order to unlock your people. So they redesign your workflows and figure out how you can succeed and be different than your competitors in this new world. And so people are failing if they leave the people out. But
Yeah.
the good news is that people who fail the first time out when they thought it was a tech upgrade, when they thought they were moving from BlackBerry to iPhones, um, they when they get another bite of the apple, they make it people oriented often.
You know what I really love, Nicole, is that you're really seeing, demonstrably, being an incredible advisor to these organizations, and also helping, build some of these programs out. You're really seeing that the successful initiatives is absolutely connecting in people, right? It's really about people being involved rather than, oh, we're just going to throw some agents out here, agentic AI, and it'll just take care of everything and goodbye, people. So I feel like you're dispelling that myth, which is really what we're here to help people understand is being compassionate of what people are going through right now. So
Yeah.
I really appreciate that, and also just the work that you've done for so many years to not only build but also invest in the solutions and the technologies that are relevant to us as a society today, and what you put out there with Human Tech Week, and more and what you're building. I can't wait to see more there. Last but not least, we have just a couple of minutes. Can you share you're an incredibly deep person and incredibly conscious person. What does compassion mean to you? And what does compassion mean to you in the context of these intelligent machines or solutions?
Yeah, I'm going to go back to, um, you know, the age of AI being the age of relationships. Um, and it's really our relationship with ourselves. And, self-compassion is actually a really hard thing, until you like, often in many cultures, it's um, there's a way that we drive ourselves that can be not compassionate, or there's a way that we speak to ourselves that can be not compassionate. And what I think about with compassion in the age of AI is that um, the top two things that humans have to do is we have to be, or the survival skills really is adaptability and ideation. And for me, ideation is iteration with creativity. And so to have that bandwidth that we need in order to be like get really good at changing and learning and ideating and iterating, and adapting, um, you know, you have to be compassionate with yourself to do that. You have to, be able to be a beginner and be compassionate with yourself to be a beginner. You have to be compassionate with the fact that, like I work on this stuff every day, all day, and I get overwhelmed. And to be like, I am overwhelmed right now, and that is okay, you know? And so in order to learn the most, and change the most, we have to be compassionate with ourselves. So it's also a part of that and relationship to self. And then with relationship to one another, I think the compassion with others in this age, I think a lot about, for me, I really want to be a part of engineering a soft landing. I think that, I'm not a utopist. Many people think that I am because, Human Tech Week is so positive, but I don't like, I don't see myself as, I also don't see myself as a techno optimist. I've read the essays closely, and I don't think that just because we build the tools, ergo humanity, is, automatically better to one another because we're not, fighting over resource constraints or fighting over resources. I think it gets very, I don't know if you remember the star belly sneeches, you know. So we have to deal with the fundamental question of, developing healing and, and supporting, um, human development, and the path towards deeper human consciousness. And so we have to be compassionate with one another in that, like, what is the ambition that we have for how we're using these tools? Do we have ambition for the betterment, of human beings and then also our planet? Or do we get lost in some sort of tech and tool? Do we get tech drunk, and lost in some sort of like, tool drunkenness? Or are we intentional and clear about, compassionately wanting to create the ability for humanity to have a abundant future? And so I think that's a compassionate thing too. Um, and at some point it's like we have to figure out how we relate to our machines, and then also, our environment. But the first two are the criteria to get to the third, how we treat ourselves, how we treat each other, compassion being a major component of adaptability. And then compassion being a big component of, how much ambition do we have for, what we want for, our species, with each other. So that's what I think compassion is.
Nicole, thank you for the very, very wise words, sharing your heart, your experience, and all that you have done and continue to do. And thank you for joining us.
You're an amazing interviewer. Thank you so much.
Am I? Oh, I don't know
You
about
make it
that, but I
easy.
think it's because we've had such amazing guests, and so I'm gonna invite everyone to, because we are now officially North America. North America, we've followed the sun, and and we've now concluded the sun is moving on. But I really, really wanted everyone to kind of join in that would like to, that's been here listening, and part of this discussion. And if you have anything that you want to say, just, I really want to thank Stephen Ibaraki, who's here. My God, just reminding us of this, that it only takes 3.5% of the world to make massive change. Think about that. That's doable, right? And that technology has to be guided by human values, not the other way around. He does amazing things with AI for Good and so much around the world with the UN and many other organizations. And then Douglas Thomas, the incredible storytelling, that and really reflecting, stories from the past, where we were afraid of, we were going to end civilization with the nuclear arms race. And that was a key point in time, and then kind of bringing us back to demonstrating that empathy can disarm fear and guide us to a moral, a moral. Well, there's different takes on that. Douglas brought, a lot for us to think about, and Matthew, really emphasizing that compassion's kind of what sparks our creative muscles around innovation. And it's really our human creativity, but also our imagination, how important that is, as we're designing and creating the future. Dakai, who's still here. Dakai, if you're awake in Hong Kong, please join us. But really reminding us in his book, Raising AI, that, AI right now is like raising a child. And we are the last humans that are raising AI. We are the final generation. So it is upon us. It's not about just, the techies or anyone else. It's us. We are the ones that are creating this, and it requires our care, responsibility, empathy. Stephen, who's still here, Stephen, if you'd like to join us again, thank you so much for the work you do at Compassion Institute, and helping ground us into the realization, this is science, neuroscience backed, that from the moment we're born, it is compassion that is the connection of who we are. And really, can we bring that compassionate training, compassionate action into our organizations and society? So we're really excited about that. And then Nicole, thank you so much again for all you're doing from Human Tech Week. I can't wait to see the full announcement of what you're building, bringing builders and the funding to help us really plan this future, and also how important it is to look within and who we are and how we connect in our relationships, and all the work you've done for so long. So everyone else on the team who would like, please unmute if you'd like to join us. And I think we're also going to be passing the baton. So let's see who is here. Deepu? Or if everyone is awake or not. I have no idea. Let me know.
Hi.
Rasha, how are things going?
Hi, that was a very great session, Really enjoyed how you moderated it. And yes,
thank you,
from
Rasha. It's all our speakers. My job was easy. It's all these brilliant people here with us.
yes. So yeah, I'd like to thank all of you for this. Yeah. And we have from Oceania, we have Tim, we have Olivera Tomic, yeah. We have Ian Haycroft here. Yes, waiting to pass the baton over. Yeah.
Hi, Ian.
Hi, guys.
Hey. So we're moving to Oceania. I'm so excited.
Hello.
Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
You might be noticing something odd over here. Just a second. Hi, Tim. I think you've got my name on your profile. I think it's because when I sent you the link, yeah, I sent you a different one.
Okay,
So
so
Chris has actually sent you
Tim,
your link now. So
Yep.
yeah.
okay, so Tim has Akshit's name. Fine.
All right.
So just so you guys know, it's been 15 hours of this global relay, and we're still here, all of us. So it's really it's a global moment. We're appreciating all the efforts you've taken for this. Yeah.
Absolutely. And
Thank you
once
so
again,
much.
thanks to the team that brought this together, around the world to make this happen, our
Yes.
beautiful speakers. And, one of the things that I'll say is that, there's a connected message that we're seeing around the world right now. And
Yes.
it's that compassion is not optional.
Oh, yeah,
right?
it's been 21 hours, right?
Yeah. This is the key to our future as AI and humanity grows. So I wanted to thank everyone for being part of this part of our global relay. And I invite everyone that's here, let's not leave compassion on the stage. Let's take this out into the world. All right. Thank you all so much.
Yeah.
And I'm passing the baton.
Hey, Ani. Yes.
Hey, Deepu.
Hey. Thank you so much on a very short time span. That is just like a miracle. That is, you made it happen, and it was amazing. Yeah.
We all made it happen.
Yeah.
It's this whole team. Takes a team. All right. Well,
And,
thanks so much.
yeah, and also this is just a beginning. That is, we just had the forum, just started the conversation, and we just need the conversation happen around the globe. And it was just an experiment that we tried, and it is we have proved that we can connect the world together, right? And
Absolutely.
of course, there will be continuity on the activities that we have done, and then we will bring together the people who actually want to make this into action, whatever we have conversated. Yeah. And then thank you so much. And now let's get to the next region, the final region. Yes.